Hi everyone! So, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but the time has come to film the end of year full houseplant tour, and I cannot believe the time has already come. I feel like this year has just flown by. It feels like it was just yesterday that I was filming the beginning of the year full houseplant tour. But for those of you who may not have seen the beginning of the year houseplant tour, let me catch you up. So at the beginning of the year, I did film a full houseplant tour with the intention of not filming another one until the very end of the year because I wanted to be able to show you guys how much the plants have changed from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So as we go along today, I'm going to be flashing up on screen what the plants looked like back in early January of 2023 so we can see just how much growth has happened, and on a lot of the plants there has been quite a bit of growth. Some of them not quite as much, and some of them have given me some problems throughout the year, so they may not look as fabulous as they did at the beginning of the year. But let's just go ahead and get right into it, and since we are already in the living room, let's just go ahead and start there. Okay, so hopefully you guys can tell that my big, beautiful Monstera deliciosa here has definitely gotten more big and more beautiful over the course of this past year. Now, it is way, way taller. It was nowhere near in line with the planter up there on the wall last year, but I have also staked up a bunch of the vines this year. Hopefully you guys can see I've put these little stakes in here and attached a bunch of the vines to that. I do still have some, I don't know if you can see down here, that are kind of starting to hang a little bit low, so I need to get a support in there for that one as well, but definitely has continued to put out a ton of growth for me this year. Also, I mentioned last year that we hadn't lost any leaves off of this plant ever before. We did have some natural leaf loss that happened of some of the oldest leaves. I think maybe about 3 that completely yellowed that I cut off of the bottom. But then I also removed a few more, you guys, that were just dragging the floor and tempting the cats. And Theo also has this habit of running into this plant and grabbing on to the rope basket it's in and spinning it around. Like, this is something that's kind of started to happen probably in the last few weeks more so than any other time before. I don't know what the deal is. I mean, I guess he's helping me out. He's rotating the plant for me so it's getting light from all sides. But honestly, I wish he wasn't doing it because he keeps kind of pushing it into the wall and I'm worried he's going to snap off some more leaves. But all in all, this plant is doing fabulous, and we did give it about a year ago the Soltech light, which I've turned off right now just because it wasn't working well for filming, but the Soltech Aspect pendant light, which I think has been a huge part of why this plant has done so well this year. I mean, it did well the year before, but I feel like the addition of that extra light is really helped it out because the only other light this plant is getting is from the southern facing windows behind me, which, as you can see, are pretty far away from this plant, but it does okay with that light this time of year when there's direct rays coming through that window, but during the summertime is when I really felt that it needed a little extra help. So I'm glad I have that Soltech light, and if you guys are interested in getting any Soltech lights for your plants, you can get 15% off when you use this code at checkout on their site. All right, let's get closer into the Tenanthe setosa over here. Okay, so when we look at the picture of the Tenanthe setosa from last year, it's definitely going to look bushier because we recently divided this plant. So we took propagations off of this, or one propagation off of this. So that's why this plant doesn't look quite as full, but hopefully you can tell it definitely got way taller. And I actually really like the sculptural look to this plant when it has the length on the stems here and the leaves up at the top. Now it is starting to push out new growth, so it will start to fill in and get a little bit more full, but I mean, it definitely grew a lot. I will try and find a picture of before we divided it to show you so you can compare that to what it looked like last year, since that's going to be a little bit more accurate than what it looks like right now. And by the way, you guys, you're going to see some beneficial bug sachets hanging on some of the plants. I am doing another preventative round of those on some of my plants right now. So if you see that, that is what those are. And we do still have the plant Velcro around the bottom of this just because when we repotted it from dividing it, it just wasn't quite stable because we removed all of the substrate off the roots. So they were kind of, the individual plantlets were flopping around a little bit. So I'm just going to leave that on until the roots really start to take hold again, and then I'll be able to remove that. But all in all, this plant has done fabulously for me. And I think part of the reason it got so tall also had to do with that Soltech pendant light. I think it really was enjoying having that extra light up there and was stretching to reach it. Okay, this plant right here, we do not have a picture of from previous years because this is a new plant. I just got it at the end of October. This is my Hoya Wilbur Graves that I was so excited about. Absolutely love this plant. I decided to try putting it up here because so far the other plants I put up here, I was putting trailing plants, and I don't know, they weren't doing that fabulously. And honestly, the Monstera and the Setosa are getting so much closer to that planter now. Like a hanging plant was going to start to look a little weird and was just going to be trailing down into those plants. So I decided to try this out, and it has started to put out a bunch of new growth. So let me get you up in here. First of all, just look at how beautiful these leaves are with their silvery variegation. But those two leaves up here at the top just came in. These are brand new leaves, and you can see they've got a little bit of that pinkish coloring on them. That happens when new leaves come in. Definitely liking the light here. I was kind of worried if the Soltec light, if that was going to be like too close to it and it was going to cause a problem, but because this is a Hoya and Hoyas really do like high levels of light, I think it's done great because of that. I have seen, let me see if I can find it. I know there's another new leaf that came out somewhere near the bottom, further down. I don't know, I can't tell which one it is anymore, you guys, but there is additional growth going on further down the vines here. I honestly am not exactly sure how many vines this is. I think it is probably like 4 vines in that pot total, but I absolutely love it. I love the way it's done up on this trellis, and it was like this when I bought it. It is the only Hoya I have on a trellis, but I kind of like it better for this particular variety just because the leaves are so much bigger on this than it is on any of my other Hoyas. And I just realized I said this was a Hoya Wilbur Graves. It's a Hoya carnosa Wilbur Graves is technically the full name, but absolutely love it. Can't wait to see how it does over the first year that I have it. Once again, just got it back at the end of October, so we've only gotten a few new leaves, but hopefully we'll get many, many more this year. Okay, let's move on and we will head over to this section behind the couch. All right, you guys, so here is my beautiful Raven ZZ plant, and I was actually kind of shocked when I went and looked at the picture from last year of this plant. I know that this plant got, I believe, at least 2 new branches over the course of this year, maybe 3, but I was just shocked at how much taller it looks because I think some of those original branches that were there last year just kept growing and I hadn't realized it. Now it is looking way more stretched out to the sides than it was last year, but a large part of that is, once again, it is pretty far back from these southern facing windows, and so those branches are really trying to kind of stretch to the light, but I don't mind it. It's very sculptural looking. I know some of you guys have asked me in the past about what to do if they're really long like that or how to keep them short, and the simple answer to that question is give it more light and they should stay shorter or at least grow more compactly together. But once again, I don't really mind it. I think it looks really good. I don't mind either that there's not a lot of leaves on the lower part of the stem, and I think that is what kind of bothers some of you guys. But once again, just give it more light and it should be fine and not do that quite as much. Now, all of these little branches down here were the original branches that were on the plant when I first got it. They're just baby branches. As the plant matures, the branches tend to come in with this thicker stem, so that's why those just look so much smaller and thinner. Also, Theo chewed on these because you know how Theo is. He is getting better. I know I keep saying, here's leaf damage because Theo chewed on a plant, but he honestly is getting a lot better, you guys. He's not doing it quite as often. It is still just primarily to get my attention when he thinks it's time to be fed, regardless of whether it's time to be fed or not. But absolutely love this plant. I can't say enough about the Raven ZZ, ZZs in general. I mean, I go in the summertime like 3 months without watering this plant, and I mean, look at it. It's done fabulously. Okay, let's move on to the shelves behind the couch, and I think we'll start with the closest one to us right here, which has my frost peperomia on it. And this plant has been a little bit weird for me this year, but a lot of it has just been my fault. So you can see we've got some yellowing leaves down here. I just went a little bit too long between waterings a few times on this plant, and peperomias will get super droopy, super floppy looking really fast if you don't water them on time, you guys. That's why I know I went a little too long, and then when you do water them after that, you tend to lose some of the lower leaves. So that's what's going on there, but other than that, this plant is doing fabulously. I do think it's grown quite a bit Maybe not quite as much as some of my other plants, but that's not entirely unexpected. I still think it is looking absolutely gorgeous though. It is flowering. It's pretty much a nonstop flower, but I don't mind these flowers. I just leave them on. They don't really, with peperomias, they don't really cause the plant to stop putting out new leaves or anything like that. They're nowhere near as energy consuming as on some other plants, but absolutely love this plant. And it has lived up here pretty much its entire life, you guys. It has done completely fine being this far back from a window. Now, would it do better if it was closer to the window? Probably, but I needed something on this shelf that was going to stay relatively small, and peperomias definitely will do that. Okay, the next plant I want to look at, we might as well just look at the other peperomia that is up here, and this is my Peperomia caparata Shumi Red. This is Peperomia caparata as well. Frost is the variety. But this guy has definitely gotten considerably bigger to the point where we are kind of sticking up out of the shelf, which might not be entirely ideal, but I don't mind. Once again, I just needed plants that would stay relatively small on these shelves. And honestly, I probably could switch these two. That one might not be quite as tall in terms of the height of the foliage as this guy, but absolutely love this plant with its deep red rippled leaves. And I know you guys have been asking me to do a peperomia care guide. It is in the works. There's just thousands and thousands of species of peperomia, and they don't all have the same care. So I'm trying to decide the best way to go about doing that video, or if I should break it up by variety. I don't know. Comment down below if you think I should just do a separate one for each variety, or if you want an entire video where I kind of talk about all the varieties, because I just keep going back and forth. So y'all let me know what would be best for you. But absolutely love this plant. Definitely has gotten fuller this year. It is getting a little bit elongated. I don't know. The good thing is even though it's getting elongated, because the leaves come in so tightly, you can't really tell, you guys. But up in here, like, hopefully you can see this main branch up in here, if the camera will focus on it instead of the shelf. I don't know if it's going to focus. I might have to do some secondary footage for you guys, but it's definitely way longer than it would be if this plant was getting more light. But once again, it doesn't look bad to me, so I really don't mind it. And these plants are pretty easygoing for me. I know other people struggle with these plants sometimes, but that's part of the reason I want to do that care guide for you guys. So that will be coming here in the near future. All right, let me reposition so we can look at the plants up on this shelf, and we've got some stories to tell. Okay, guys, so I want to look at my beautiful philodendron micans first. Now, we did just recently repot this beauty, and we removed all of the substrate off of this plant, and so she is throwing a little bit of a fit right now and killing off some of her leaves. That's why these look a little bit yellow up here, but all in all, she still looks great. She definitely is more full than she was last year. Also, we have propagated this plant a lot, so in terms of like total growth, I mean, we've probably cut off probably 3 to 4 feet worth of vines over the course of this year. So she has been nonstop growing, but she definitely also put out a bunch of new vines, which these are all, where you see these little leaves, these are all new vines that she put out this year. So definitely looks a little bit more full than last year. I'm really just hoping we don't lose too many leaves as part of this repot. I do still have her. This is where she has always lived. She has always been on the shelf. She's been happy on the shelf. So I'm just going to keep her here because I have no reason to move her, and she looks great up here. But she's getting the same amount of light that she was getting before. So hopefully her recovery from the repot should go pretty smoothly. I know some of you had mentioned to me that yours didn't go that smoothly with your philodendron micans, but she's still putting out new growth down at the bottom. So I think we should be okay. I'm just waiting to see more roots spreading around in that pot before I will feel 100% okay about it. But it's normal to have some leaf loss, you guys, when repotting plants like this, so it's not too big of a deal. Okay, next up, this is my Syngonium Mini Illusion. I think it's a berry variety, I believe. It was not labeled, so that is a guess. It is now in LECA. I am working on a LECA video for you guys. You know, I've been experimenting with LECA, and I took this plant and removed all the substrate and transferred it to LECA for several reasons, which I will go into in the LECA video. But I did want to do at least one plant where I was transferring from soil to LECA to show you guys the process and how it works, because everything else that I've put in LECA so far was a water propagation, which is way easier to take a water propagation into LECA than a plant that was previously in soil. So hopefully you can see this plant has gotten much bushier and bigger since last year. Now, I have lost some leaves recently as a result of transferring this. Looks like we might lose that one right there as well, but still looking big and beautiful. Now, this plant is definitely way too high here. I actually bought a smaller glass vessel for this plant for transferring it, but once I got all the substrate off of it, I was shocked at how long the roots were, you guys. They were insanely long, so I had to put it into a taller vessel, but once again, it likes the lighting here. It's been living here pretty much most of its life that I've had it in this household. So I didn't want to change the light and the substrate at the same time. But eventually, once it gets acclimated to this LECA, I'm going to have to move it somewhere else now because it's really too tall for this shelf. But that will have to wait for a future date. But let's go ahead and move on. And I might have to adjust lighting as we get closer to the windows. We'll just see. But up here on this shelf, we do have my Epipremnum pinnatum Baltic Blue, which we also recently repotted. Now, I don't think this plant looks that much fuller than it did last year. Part of that reason is probably because all it wants to do is put out runners and not give me any new leaves. We are also going to lose a few leaves from the repotting process. Once again, that is totally normal. I need to decide what I'm going to do with these Epipremnum pinnatums that I own, you guys, because I just don't want runners. I really want them to trail and look good, but they really are telling me that they want to climb by putting out all those runners. So I don't know. We're going to have to make a decision at some point this year as to what we're going to do. But this plant does really like it up on the shelf. Every time I try to move it away from the shelf, it throws a fit and I end up having to move it back. So if we do put it on a pole, we're going to have to find somewhere with equivalent lighting for it to be happy. But next up, we have my beautiful Hoya linearis. Absolutely love this plant. It is caught up on one of the runners here. And I did recently move this up to this higher shelf because I just kept having to chop it because it was hitting the couch because it was on this lower shelf here. And I wanted to let it grow even longer, so I decided to go ahead and move it up here. Now, it has definitely gotten longer since last year. We did plant some new cuttings up into the top, so it should look a little bit fuller, but when it comes to these kinds of plants, they often don't look very different from year to year because really you're just getting new growth at the bottom, and then as it gets too long, you're chopping it off. So it's not necessarily going to start to look more full or anything at the top unless you're just constantly propagating and replanting up in the top, and we only did that once this year. But still doing fabulous. Absolutely loves life on this shelf. Probably would actually like to be a little bit closer, honestly. It's not quite... How do I put this? It doesn't dry out nearly as quickly as my other Hoyas that we're about to look at that are closer to the window or directly in the window, but it's still obviously super happy and looking great. Okay, if we come down here, this plant is another newly acquired plant. I think I got it back in June or July. So this is my Syngonium tricolor red spot. Absolutely love it. Gets that pinkish reddish coloring on it. Is obviously just a baby plant. Has not really grown much for me since I got it. I think it's only put out like one new leaf, but it didn't have a lot of roots, so it's really just working on rooting itself, and then it will start to put out a lot more leaves. But since my other Syngonium that we just looked at has done well on these shelves, I decided to put this one here because, once again, it is something small at the moment that will fit on this shelf, but I know that this type of lighting is lighting that it will like. Oh, and before I forget, you guys, everybody always asks me where I got these shelves. I got them from Nebraska Furniture Mart, but I've seen other furniture stores sell very similar looking shelves, so you probably can find them other places as well, and I don't even know if Nebraska Furniture Mart still carries them or not, but that is where I got them. So if you want to try and find them, I would start there. Okay, last shelf over here closest to the window has our string of pearls. I absolutely love this plant, and unfortunately, Theo pulled this whole shelf down shortly after I got him, and we lost a lot of vines off of Pearl. We lost some vines off of my Hoya curtisii over here, and I was not happy about it. Now, on the Hoya curtisii, it wasn't quite as obvious, like a change, but with Pearl, it definitely made her look less full because they were whole vines. So looking at footage from last year, she might not even look as full this year because of that. But once again, kind of like with the Hoya linearis, these plants don't change that much from year to year unless you like start to lose a lot of the pearls off of them, and then they'll just start to look a little bit bald. But she's done pretty well. I mean, obviously when Theo pulled her down, we lost some pearls, so that's why there are some missing pearls there. But all in all, has done great. Probably is going to need a repot this year for sure. Haven't repotted it since I've had it. I think I've had it for a little over 2 years. But the Hoya curtisii probably looks a little bit fuller. Definitely we got longer this year. We did lose a whole branch that was right here, whole vine. I mean, when Theo pulled everything off the shelf, so that's why that looks a little bit funky there. But it'll start to fill back in and grow back in. But this plant is one of my favorite Hoyas, and it has done so well for me. I love the shape of the leaves. I love the little silver flecking on it. Just a fabulous, fabulous plant. It is like hands down probably my fastest growing Hoya that I have. I've always kind of told you guys I feel like the smaller leafed Hoyas tend to grow more quickly than larger leafed Hoyas for me. But this one has definitely taken off this year. We did even propagate it a few times, and it looks like we're going to have to propagate it again probably in a few months because it's going to start to hit the couch again. But absolutely love it. And once again, it loves life right next to this southern facing window. It wants all the light it can get, but it's still not too much light, you guys, because this plant never sun stresses for me. So even though it's getting direct light right now, we don't have any of that pinkish or maroonish type coloring going on it. So it's obviously not even remotely too much light for it. But I am going to have to reposition and adjust the camera settings for filming these plants in the window. So give me 1 second. Okay, guys, so here is my very beautiful variegated string of hearts. Now, you did not get to see this plant in last year's video because even though I did already have it, you guys didn't know I had it, and I was saving it for a video, a few videos after last year's houseplant tour, showing you guys my 2 newest wishlist plants, and this was one of them. But it has grown considerably in terms of length. I have had to propagate it a few times over the course of the year. It's still looking just as full and lush at the top as it was back then. So all in all, done pretty well, but not like a super noticeable difference just because the majority of the growth happened at the bottom and we were having to chop that off as it got too long. But doing fabulously, absolutely love this plant. Definitely loving it a little bit more than my regular chain of hearts, aka Serapagio woodii, just so you know that is the scientific name for this plant. My other chain of hearts is just annoying me, but we will look at it here in a second. But let me get you down below here so we can look at the plants on this shelf first. Okay, so hopefully this lighting is not too crazy for you guys. I know it's just a little bit difficult filming directly in these southern facing windows, but at least it's slightly overcast today, otherwise this would be a hot mess. But this is my Monstera albo that was gifted to me earlier this year by one of you guys who lives in Hawaii. So I do not have footage of this from last year either because I haven't had it. I think I got it back in April was when I got it, but was so happy to receive this as a gift. Definitely a beautiful, beautiful plant. It has not given me a new leaf yet, but that's not abnormal. It was a rooted cutting only when I received it. It has gotten super rooted, but it just has not decided to give me a leaf yet. But hopefully you guys can see here, there are a lot of roots going on in here. And then we also have this one insanely long aerial root that I have done absolutely nothing about. So I need to do something with that. I'm actually kind of shocked that Theo hasn't been messing with that. And this plant is usually, the leaves are usually facing the window so it can get light, you guys. I just turned it around so that you guys obviously can see it better. But Monstera albos, part of the reason they are so pricey, you guys, is because they are hard to get to grow. They take forever to grow to a decent size, and you're basically paying for the labor and time and effort for somebody to get them to the point that they are when you buy them. So that's why, like, the more leaves they have, the more expensive they are, etc. I just said Theo hasn't been messing with that, but look what is happening. I shouldn't have moved it and flicked it like that. Say hi, Theo. Let's not mess with the plants or the aerial root, please. I think we're going to just, nope. Theo, no. Theo, stop. No. No, no, no. You leave that alone, mister. Mr. Theo. Leave it be. You gonna be good, or am we gonna have to take a break here? Okay, hopefully he's gonna be good. Let's move on to my oh so beautiful Hoya Wei-Eti eye. I think I'm gonna have to shift a little this way, you guys, so the lighting will cooperate. If I have to, we can always move these onto the couch to look at them, but I like to look at them in their place so you get an idea of, like, you know, they're living directly in the southern facing window. How are they doing? This plant has put out a ton of new growth. This is another one of the Hoyas that has grown a lot for me this year. Now, it's not notoriously known for being a super fast growing Hoya, but this one has done pretty well for me, and this side is definitely the more full side, I think. But all in all, it's not going to look crazy different probably from last year, just because it is a Hoya, and they tend to root first, you guys, and then they sort of slowly grow, and then eventually they finally start to take off. But mine, I don't really have a lot of them that are in that just leaping tons of new growth phase. Obviously, the Curtisii we looked at was in that phase, but this one not so much. It's kind of in its creeping phase. It's putting out a lot of new growth, but not at like an insanely fast rate. But still absolutely love it. It is doing fabulously for me. And you can see this plant, these are the new leaves that are coming in slightly pink, which is not abnormal on a Hoya. But you can see some of these older leaves have kind of a little bit more of a pink tinge to them. That is a little bit of sun stressing because it is getting the direct light in these southern facing windows this time of year, but it's still not a ton. And I said it before and I will say it again, you guys, I replaced the builder grade windows with these new upgraded windows, and I can't recommend them enough. Like, if you have the ability to replace your windows with better windows, I feel like I could put any plant here practically and it will be fine. Like, it's not going to get like sunburned or anything because these windows just block so much more of the harshness that causes that from the sunlight, but still gives them plenty of light to survive and thrive. Absolutely love that I made that decision to replace those windows. Okay, my Alocasia Maharani over here. If you're new to the channel, this Alocasia has been my problem child. Like, it always just looks a little bit crazy like this. It never has had more than, I think, 5 leaves at a time. Every time it starts to turn around and behave for me, it then starts to flower, which is, I'm pretty sure that's a flower. It's starting to push out right there, right now. And then it starts dropping leaves and just pushing out flowers. It drives me up the wall. It is definitely like my least favorite out of all of my Alocasias, just because it is such a pain in my butt. But also, you guys, we do need to do a little bit of, I like to call it plant plastic surgery, when I take plants that are getting a little bit wonky like this. So hopefully you can see here how grown out the base of that corm is. I need to repot this into a deeper pot. I have done that with 2 of my other Alocasias this year that we were going to look at, and it really does help them to kind of kick back off and start behaving a little bit better. So I'm definitely going to be doing that here soon, or I might wait till the spring at this point, and hopefully that will help this plant out because I'm just kind of over it at this point. But I don't even remember exactly what it looked like last year. I will flash it up on screen for you. Probably looked about the same. Maybe we were at a good point where it had more leaves, but I kind of doubt it. Probably looked about like this with just a few leaves, and they grow so weird, you guys. I don't even know. And that is just from guttation. So if you don't know, Alocasias are notorious for guttating. Basically, when there's too much water and the roots take up too much water, it'll expel it through its leaves, usually the very tips or the edges of the leaves. So if your Alocasias are crying, especially in the morning when you wake up, aka just dripping water off of their leaves, that's what that is. You just need to get a little more consistent with your watering. Now, they do like to be kept slightly more on the moist side. So when I say consistent with your watering, if you overwater them, they can guttate, but also if you let them get too dry and then water them, they will guttate. So you've really got to dial it in as close to perfection as possible to avoid guttation. It's just one of those things. These aren't the only plants that do it, but they tend to do it more than any other plants that you probably own in your home. Okay, we're going to move on to the next shelf, and Theo might be our guide for this since he is laying there right now. You want to help tell the people about the plants, Theo? Are you just going to lay there? Okay, you just lay there. I'll tell them about the plants. All right, you guys. So over here, we have my Alocasia Tiny Dancer. Absolutely love this alocasia. It is hands down one of my favorite alocasias. Now, this is not the same type of alocasia as that Maharani that we just looked at, or as any of my other alocasias that we'll be looking at today. All the other alocasias are what are known as jewel alocasias. This is not. And I don't know that there is a common, like, name for non-jewel alocasias, honestly, but they do tend to grow a little bit differently. They do tend to tolerate higher levels of light better than jewel alocasias, and most non-jewel alocasias get very large. Those are your giant alocasias that you're used to seeing, except for this tiny dancer, which stays nice and small and compact, has these cute little cupped leaves, and it just kind of has a whimsical type look to it. Now, the oldest leaves on this plant, I think we're getting ready to probably kill them off. There's some more damage from guttation there, but this plant has been putting out a ton of new leaves. Probably looks a little bit fuller than it did this time last year, but it hands down loses way less leaves than any of my other alocasias, which once again are all jewel alocasias. As this plant pushes out new leaves, typically the older leaves stay put. I think I've removed maybe 2 or 3 off of this plant for the entire year when they just naturally died off. Also, this plant has never flowered for me, unlike my other alocasia that are just at least twice, 2, 3, 4, maybe times a year start flowering out of nowhere. This one has never flowered, but it's obviously a very happy in the southern facing window, and I love it. I love that it stays nice and compact. It's perfect for this spot, and I love, once again, oh, Dio, you're gonna knock something off. He's moving pots. Be careful, sir. Anyways, once again, I love how whimsical it is. They're called tiny dancers not only because they stay small, but the leaves just look like they're kind of dancing on the ends of these very thin, elongated stems, but absolutely love it. Okay, up next, this is, and you probably can't even tell that it's variegated right now, but this is my variegated Monstera adansonii. This is the Indo variety. This was a plant that was gifted to me late last January by Airwaid Asia. I will flash up here for you what it looked like, but honestly, you guys, this plant drives me nuts. It has gotten a little bit chlorotic. I think, you better not be about to chew on that. I think it probably needs a little bit less light than it's getting, and it will get a deeper green and the variegation will show up more. I just don't really have a good place to put it. And I tried moving it just to my coffee table, which is a few feet back from these windows a while back, but then the roots started looking like something funky was going on, like maybe it was going to start to get root rot or something. It's not that drastic of a change, but it did put out a new leaf that was darker green and had more variegation on it when I moved it. So I thought, okay, good. And then Theo ate it. I swear this is not going to be a video all about Theo eating leaves, but he was not exactly the most well-behaved cat when I first brought him home, and he still sometimes is not well-behaved, but at least right now he's not trying to chew on it. But yeah, this plant just is not looking its best. It also is not exactly the fastest grower for me, and I really wanted to propagate it and put more in the pot and have it be a trailer, but I just have a feeling this is one of those types of adansonii that's really just not going to be happy unless I give it a pull. So we'll see what we're going to do with it. I don't know. It's just not my favorite plant right now, but who knows? Will it stay in my collection or not? I'm not certain at this point, but I definitely want to try moving it somewhere else first to see if I can't get it back to having the correct coloration. The sun is now coming out, you guys, so things might get a little bit tricky for filming here, but we're going to do our best. But yeah, all in all, it's done okay, but not my favorite plant in my collection at the moment. Okay, let me back up a little bit. Well, maybe I can just hold it up for you guys. I'll take it out of its cover pot. This is my black velvet alocasia, which is not going to be looking its best for you guys compared to last year especially. Now, we did only have a few leaves last year when we did this, but I did recently replant this deeper, like I was discussing I need to do on that Maharani. And so it is now working on developing new roots before it's going to push a new leaf. And it does have, hold on you guys, it's hard to do this with one hand while holding the camera with the other. It is pushing out new corms from below the soil, but the problem is this one was so deep, the leaves, just the tip of one of the first leaves that came out is at the surface. I've been contemplating taking it out of this pot and trying to pull that corm up some more. I just don't know if it's going to work. because it's really low in there and I'm not sure how rooted it is down in there. But there's a bunch of other corms that are rooting in there right now that are going to start to produce new growth as well. So this is going to go from this one leaf, one plant situation to multiple plants in one pot. And it does have a new leaf starting underneath there. It's just been working on developing roots in those additional corms, shooting those off since I reburied it first. That's why it looks like this, but it always kind of gets worse before it gets better when you do this with alocasias, but then when it gets better, it gets really better, which we'll see an example of that here in a second. So definitely not looking fabulous right now. Theo did punch some holes in that at one point, but it will get better. Okay, let's see if we can, how the lighting is for our donkey's tail here. Not horrible lighting, hopefully. Hopefully it's not like quite too bright now that that sun's coming in. Now this plant has definitely gotten considerably longer. We do have propagations that I had just put back up in the top, like well, first of all, these fall off, like I'm not even gonna touch it because they fall off so easily. Whenever I water this, I always lose a few of these leaves and I just put them back up in the top. And so that's what you're seeing here. All of this new stuff sticking up out here at the top and everything is new growth coming from those little leaves that I stuck in the top. I'll get up in the top and show you everything that's sprouting off up there in a second. But that's why when I do lose leaves up here on these, when they start to look a little bald at the top, I don't worry about it because all that stuff I put up there is going to grow over and cover that up. Now, this plant, in my experience, does tend to put out much greener growth on the new growth points, and the older tends to fade to this more kind of yellowish color. It is a succulent, so this is not a case of it's just too much light and it's getting chlorotic because of that. It wants southern facing light. It just is how this plant behaves, at least for me. If you have one and it doesn't do this, let me know and let me know what kind of lighting you have it in. But absolutely love the way it looks. I just really wish it was not so sensitive to being moved and wouldn't drop leaves when you do. I mean, you guys, I probably need to repot it this year, and I know how I'm going to do it, but I'm just terrified to do it because, I mean, I'm going to lose a ton of leaves. It's almost like, is it worth it to repot it if it's going to end up looking like crap after you do it just because it's going to drop all of its leaves, if you know what I mean. But we have not had to trim this plant ever. So it's not like a super fast grower. I think I've had it 2 years now. I'll flash it up on screen for you if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was 2 years in November that I had it. Or when I originally got it. But when I originally got it, you guys, nothing was trailing. It was just all like little stuff sticking up out of the top like that. So this is considerable amount of new growth. Once again, compared to last year, it probably, definitely looks longer, but it probably looks a little bit fuller. I'm going to get it from the other side for you guys. I'm also trying to figure out what that is. Can you guys see that? There's something like spiky there. I don't know what that is. Okay, let me reposition. Okay, you guys, so the lighting is not as great coming from this side, but I just wanted you to see this side. We do still have some balding up there at the very top of some of those vines, but once again, that new stuff that's coming in will drape over and hide it, but everything else is still looking very full. And those spiky things are flowers. It's starting to get flowers. I'll try to get some different footage with my iPhone because I can get better close-ups. I didn't even realize it was starting to flower, but it's flowering. Okay, let me go back around to the other side and we'll film up in the top so you can see what's happening. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see all of this new growth kicking off. That is that darker kind of green, and hopefully you can see all the little babies I dropped down in there that are starting to sprout off. That is going to help fill this plant back in. Well, it's going to fill it in even more on the top, but it's going to help to fill in and cover up these slightly balding spots at the top of some of these vines. But super impressed with this plant in general, you guys. Once again, I just wish it wasn't so sensitive, and I will flash the scientific name up on screen for you because I have it like envisioned in my brain, but I know I'm going to pronounce it wrong. So this is what the scientific name of this plant is, but it's commonly referred to as a donkey's tail. It is slightly different than what is referred to as the burro's tail. There's a slightly different look to them, but still a fun plant if you can manage to not knock all of its leaves off. But let's move on to our last shelf. All right, you guys, so this is my regular chain of hearts, non-variegated one that's driving me crazy. We did repot this year, so the footage you're going to see, it was in a smaller pot, so it's going to look a little bit more full from last year just because the vines were more closely clustered together. But this plant just hasn't been annoying me. It's growing just fine. It keeps growing down into the Alocasia bambino, and I keep having to chop it, but it's been losing a lot of leaves, and it's just not growing as nicely for me as my variegated one, and I'm just kind of a little bit over it. But it's still a fabulous plant. I wish the lighting was a little bit better. So here, hopefully you can see those beautiful green leaves. Now they don't look green down here because they are red-backed leaves, and that sun shining through is making them look kind of more orangish. But yeah, I still like this plant. I don't know. I almost feel like it's just started misbehaving more since we repotted it, but it definitely needed it. It was so root bound, and I was losing a ton of leaves because of that. So I can't feel bad about repotting it, and I know it's fine with this level of light. I just don't know. Maybe it needs to be repotted again. Who knows? We will check it in the spring. But if we come down here to this shelf, I think we'll start over here. So this is my Epipremnum pinnatum albo, and I think I'm going to pull it out, you guys, off to the side here because we're starting to get direct light coming through here. Hopefully you can tell. And it's just going to be hard to film, so let me relocate it where we can look at it better. Okay guys, hopefully that's a little bit better on the lighting now. This plant I also did not have last year. I got this plant from Nicholson Hardy, which is a plant store that I filmed a plant shop tour of earlier this year back in the spring, and they were nice enough to gift me some plants as a thank you for doing that video, and this was one of the ones I got. Now this plant did suffer root rot from the fertilizer burn situation I recently had on some of my plants. I did have to restart this plant in water, so basically I had to remove all of the roots and then get it to reroot in water before potting it back up. It is doing fine now, but once again, just like my Epipremnum pinnatum Baltic Blue, this plant is just wanting to give me a ton of runners, which is annoying. Now, if I was going to put one on a pole and not have it trail, this is probably the one that I would be most happy with having on a pole, especially because it is variegated. You get to see those nice variegated leaves, and these leaves will get very large and get fenestrations on them as this plant matures, and putting it on a pole is the way to get it to really fully mature and the fastest way to get it to fully mature. But right now I'm more concerned with just making sure that it is recovering from its root rot situation from the fertilizer burn situation before really worrying about that. So let me put this guy back and I will grab the Alocasia bambino. Okay, so here is my beautiful Alocasia bambino, and this is another jewel alocasia and another one that we repotted to get the corms deeper down into the soil earlier this year. So when you see the picture from last year, I think you can probably tell in this picture, if I recall correctly, that the corms were very overgrown and growing out. And I think we still had a decent number of leaves, but it went downhill pretty quickly after that, you guys, because the corms were so overgrown. We got down to just a few leaves on each of them, and that's when I decided to repot this deeper. And just like you saw with the black velvet alocasia, it then lost even more leaves, but now it has reestablished itself and it is coming back in looking beautiful. Now I did have to remove the two oldest leaves off of each of these main corms a couple of days ago, so we did have even more leaves before that. That was just natural leaf loss though, no big deal there. But we also have a little corm baby that is kicked off down there that has now produced 3 leaves in total, so that is going to help to fill this pot in even more. I absolutely love my Alocasia bambino. Very similar to the Alocasia poly, except that this one stays much smaller and maintains these smaller leaves. And honestly, you guys, that works really well for me, especially on these shelves in the living room. So if you have places where, for example, if you want hanging plants up above your plants and you need plants that are going to stay relatively low. Now, obviously the monstera over there is not going to always stay that low, so eventually it will not live there. But all the other plants that I have back here, typically, or for the most part, are ones that are going to stay relatively short and also can tolerate higher levels of light. And so that's why I like having these smaller alocasias, is that they work very well in that space. Also, any type of Hoya works well in that space, but once again, most of my Hoyas I let trail, but if you did put them on trellises like my Wilbur Graves, that would be another good option for types of plants to put in like a southern facing window like this. But absolutely love this plant, so happy that it is happier now that I have buried it deeper. But let me grab our last plant from that shelf to look at. Okay, so this is my oh so beautiful parallel peperomia, aka, I'm gonna probably mess this up, it is a Peperomia petiolata. I'm going to mess it up. I will flash it up on screen for you, the full scientific name, but commonly referred to as a parallel peperomia, and we have gotten considerably along this year. We have propagated this plant, I think, once this year, and we put some of the propagations back up into the top of the plant, and they are starting to kick off now. I am also noticing, I don't know why that looks like that in the middle there. I don't think that's where we chopped one, but it looks like something broke off at some point from there. Maybe Theo did something, who knows. And then right here, this was a case of Theo accidentally broke off, like he didn't bite off, he just knocked into this plant and knocked off the new growth there. But you can see there's new growth trying to start in down here, and same thing on those vines back there. So that is going to produce new leaves here eventually. I may have to cut this off, but I want to wait till it gets new growth going on there. But this plant has definitely filled out a lot for me. I really need to move it to somewhere where it can like actually trail, or I need to put it up on a trellis. Now I will say, you guys, some of this foliage has gotten a little bit yellow lately. It could be from the fertilizer situation, honestly, but it didn't affect everything. You can see over here that we are still looking pretty green on the ends. I would say maybe it could be from getting direct light right now. Maybe it's just getting chlorotic, but it didn't do that last year. So not really sure exactly what that is about. The plant is still actively growing. The roots look good. All in all, we have done fabulously this year, so I'm not too worried about that. I will keep an eye on it though, and if anything starts to look worse or like it's going more awry or anything like that, I will address it at that point in time. This could also possibly be one of the propagations that we stuck back in the top, and maybe it's just been struggling to get fully rooted. That might be why that looks that way as well. But I absolutely adore this plant. Okay, you guys, we got one more plant to look at here in the living room before we move on to the bedroom. Okay, so over here on my coffee table, and honestly getting a little too tall for my coffee table because she is now blocking the TV depending on where you're sitting on the couch. This is my beautiful Calathea ornata, aka pinstripe Calathea. This plant is looking fabulous. If you don't know the whole story, she got spider mite shortly after I originally got her, which was probably 2.5 years ago or so now. We went down to like 3 leaves, and then we staged a comeback. So in the footage from last year, you'll see there are definitely more than 3 leaves, but we were still very kind of short and compact because we were still trying to reestablish ourselves. But now we are starting to put out much bigger, much taller, beautiful leaves with these nice little pink stripes on them. It almost looks fake. This is one of those plants that when people who are not planting people come to my house and see it, they're always like, that plant's not real, it's fake. I'm like, nope, it's real, trust me. So definitely doing fabulous. We are going to lose like our oldest leaf down there here shortly. Not unexpected this time of year. I do tend to have some leaf loss this time of year with this plant, and we do tend to get crispy edges, but not so much this year, you guys. This one right here has a little bit of crisp on the tip, but that's it. And you guys, my humidity, I'm looking right now, it's 29% humidity in here right now. And if you don't believe me, allow me to show you. 29% humidity. So I tell you guys, and you can see probably the range over the last 24 hours is 27 to 32. So I've told you guys that that's the humidity range that I typically have in the winter here in my house, and I don't have a ton of crispiness. So that's why I maintain all the time that when people tell you Calatheas get crispy because of low humidity, I don't think that is always the case. Could it be? Maybe. Odds are, though, it's something else going on. And this plant is living by itself on this table, right? Pretty far back from southern-facing windows, but very happy living here. No kind of burn. It does get direct light on its leaves for part of the day this time of year, but doesn't seem to care about it. But once again, I do have those upgraded windows, so that might have something to do with it. But yeah, you guys, I use filtered water from my fridge to water this plant. I don't do anything else special to the water. I don't add anything to it to take out chlorine or anything like that. And I fertilize it with my liquid fertilizer once a month at least during the summertime, sometimes once every 2 weeks. But I mean, you guys, she looks great. I don't even know what to tell you guys. I know whenever I show my Calathea, there are some of you out there who are like, in awe, love it. You also love Calathea. And then there's the rest of you out there who are like, I hate Calathea because I can't get my Calathea to look like this. How do you get your Calathea to look like this? And I've always maintained that they aren't fussy unless you fuss over them. Like, I think they just don't want to be fussed over. I don't let them dry all the way out. I let them get probably no more than like a quarter to half of the way dry. And then I water them again, like I was just describing. They don't get humidifiers. I really don't do anything super special, you guys. And occasionally, maybe they throw a fit and maybe they kill off a bunch of leaves, but they always come back. So that's really all I do. I really just think the key is to not fuss too much over them. And also, once you find a place they're happy living, like this plant is happy living here, do not move them. They do get fussy if you change their home. If they are happy and they are showing you they are happy, do not move them, because then they will show you, hey, guess what? Now I'm not happy and I'm going to throw a fit. So I really do stand by, try not to move them once you find a place that they're happy. But so glad that this one has done so well for me this year. Okay, you guys, let's move on to the bedroom. Okay, so here we have my Tenanthe luberciana, and this is arguably one of the plants that has grown the most for me over the course of this last year. I mean, just in the last few weeks, these higher parts up here have shot up. This plant has just been growing like mad. Now, I have been losing quite a few leaves off of this plant as well, but you can't tell because it just keeps pumping out more and more new growth. I have also this year had to stake this plant up, and I am realizing I probably need to buy some more stakes because it looks like we're starting to get a little too heavy and sagging a little bit over here as well, so I need to probably stake that up. But this plant has just grown, and grown some more, and it is in one of the lowest lighting situations sort of in this house. And by that, I just mean it is really far away from the east facing window over here and then the southern facing windows back here, but it has always done fine for me. It has obviously maintained its variegation, and I absolutely love this plant. We are probably going to need to check it in the spring for a repot though, because I think it has been, by that time, I think it will have been maybe almost 2 years since the last time I repotted it, and it is starting to dry out more quickly in between watering, so it's probably due for a pot up. And I don't know, we might divide it when I do that. I'm not certain yet. I mean, it is getting a little bit large for this space that it's in. And also, I would have to find a larger pot. I don't currently have one, but we'll see when spring rolls around. Okay, let's move over here next to this east-facing window. I do like to refer to this, let me adjust our lighting a little bit here. I like to refer to this as my Calathea corner, because I do have mostly Calatheas over here. So starting at the top here, we do have the largest rattlesnake Calathea that I own. This plant is definitely in need of a repot. I know that for a fact, but I just can't decide, you guys, if I'm going to divide it, because I really want to keep it here, and you can already tell it doesn't really fit in its cover pot from the last time we repotted it back in the spring. But I also kind of just want to see what happens if it keeps getting bigger and more beautiful. So I don't know. What I might do is just take this one up a pot size and maybe move it to somewhere else, like maybe my office or something, and maybe take the one from my office, which will fit in this cover pot, and put it here, but I haven't fully decided yet. But it's gotten bigger, I think, than probably what it looked like last year. Maybe not super noticeably, but it definitely is starting to lose more leaves right now because it is root bound in there. So I definitely need to make a decision on what I'm going to do with it here pretty soon. But moving down, we have my Peacock Calathea next. This is a Calathea macquayana, and just a real quick reminder, you guys, I know I'm saying Calathea throughout this video, but technically they've been reclassified as Gopertia. Once again, until everybody gets on board with calling them Gopertia, I'm going to keep calling them Calathea, because 9 times out of 10, that's what you're going to still see them labeled as in the store. Now, this plant has definitely taken off more for me this year. It's definitely gotten quite a bit taller, definitely filled out some more. We've gotten those larger leaves now coming in up at the top. Absolutely in love with this plant. Love me the back sides of these leaves with that reddish undertones to them. Beautiful, beautiful plant, has done fabulously for me. Probably also needs to be checked for a repot in the springtime. I don't remember when the last time I repotted that one was. But down here we have my Calathea Freddy, which is also known as a Calathea consina. And Freddy is not going to look as good as he did last year, because as I've told you guys in quite a few videos recently, Fred just does what Fred does, which is flower pretty much all of the year except for like the winter time. And this year he also, on top of that, lost a bunch of leaves. We still have one old one there that looks like it's going to die off. But the good news is I did repot Freddie not that long ago, and we have started pushing out a bunch of big, beautiful new leaves. So Freddie will start to fill himself back in. He'll start to look more like he did last year, and then he will probably start to flower again, and we will repeat the cycle, I swear. I don't know what his deal is, but when he's full, he looks beautiful, and you know, he's doing his thing. He's surviving. As long as he's surviving, he's all good in my book. I just really wish we would not flower for the majority of the year. Okay, up next we have Rose, aka Calathea rosapicta medallion, hence why I call her Rose. Absolutely love this plant and love the fact that she has been performing way better for me this year than any of my previous years. I don't know if it's going to be super noticeable when we look at her from a year ago that she's looking way better. Hopefully it is. She has way less crispiness. She actually does have more leaves, even if it's hard to tell. But she has just been pumping out all kinds of new growth lately. I haven't repotted her in a while either. It actually looks like she might just be in my basic mix, so it's been a while. So probably you're going to have to check on Rose for a repot in the spring as well. There's going to be a lot of repotting to be done, you guys. But I'm going to stay on top of it this year, unlike this past year. New Year's resolutions, do not fall behind on repotting. But yes, Rose is doing great, and I did struggle when I first got Rose to find a place that she likes to live. I put her here at one point, and she seems to be happy, so this is where she's going to stay until she outgrows this space, at which point I will have to make that decision again of whether or not to divide her or try to move her. But when you move prayer plant family plants, as I've mentioned, sometimes they throw a fit, so I try not to relocate them if I don't have to, but sometimes if you're taking them up to a larger pot, you don't have much of a choice. But moving on to our very crowded windowsill, which I really need to figure something out with this. Can't even like see the plants in the middle, hardly. I just need to find better places for them. But this is my Joseph's coat, which if you saw my nice and naughty video talking about the plants that did well for me this past year, or the best, I guess, and the ones that did the worst, this one was on the naughty list because we did also start to flower a lot, and then we started to lose a lot of leaves. And I also suspected that we needed to be repotted, so I did recently take this up from a 4-inch pot to a 6-inch pot. Now, that was only maybe like a week ago, so we'll see if that helps, but we are getting new growth coming in on those bare stems down there. Hopefully you can see that. It's not uncommon for this plant to do this to me at least once a year, so hopefully it will start to fill back out and start to look a little bit more like it did last year, but it's definitely grown more before it started doing this year. Now, this guy right here has definitely taken off. This is the little rattlesnake calathea from the video way back when I first started this channel called Is Your Plant Really Dead?, where we had just half of a leaf left on this plant, and it definitely was still alive, and it definitely has staged a comeback. You can see there are new leaves starting to come in still on this plant, but it is really starting to take off. We did repot this one earlier this year, and that definitely helped, and now it's just starting to fill in more and more. So once again, just because a calathea looks like it might be dead to you, don't throw it away. I guarantee you it can come back as long as the roots look healthy. All right, let me move around to the other side. Okay, so we'll start with my string of turtles, aka Peperomia prostrata here. You guys, you know how much I love this plant, and I realized that I had not really shown this plant to you much this year, so you did get to see it in my fall favorites video, but she has just grown like crazy. Now, we have been losing some whole vines lately. I'm not certain why. It might just be like normal vine loss. I do think that she probably had a little bit of fertilizer burn going on from the fertilizer incident, which, by the way, you guys, I don't remember if I've mentioned this yet, but I'll link that video down in the description below for you so you can check out what I'm talking about. And you can see we do have like a vine that's dying off right there where all those yellow leaves are, but the rest of her looks great. She's still pumping out tons of new growth. You can see those new vines sticking up there at the top. So she's replacing what she's killing with new stuff. So when I see that, that's usually a good indicator that I don't need to worry too much about the fact that some of the older vines are dying off. She's definitely still flowering everything. I think she's doing okay. I might just need to dial in my watering a little bit more. I did also repot her at one point this year, and I don't remember exactly when that was now. So we might have just been killing some stuff off when that happened, and I just didn't notice it until now. But also, I have not trimmed her in I don't even know how long. And she's getting pretty close to the floor. So I think we're going to be due for a haircut here soon and a propagation. But all in all, probably looking, other than the fact that it's got to look way longer than it did last year, other than that, probably looking about the same as last year, but not uncommon for plants that are string of, as we've already talked about, like this. Okay, the last plant up here is my Hoya Croniana Super Silver. And this plant I have not had all year. I got this one from Nicholson Hardy as well when I did that plant shop tour back in the spring, but it has definitely grown quite a bit since I got it, and it's definitely gotten way more silver. Hopefully you can see, so silver that that light is like reflecting very brightly off of those leaves. But when I first got it, they were more like that leaf you see there that's got more green with a little bit of silver on it than all silver, but it is called a super silver for a reason. So it is not uncommon for it to lose some of that splash and go to all silver. But I absolutely love it. I think it's going to grow pretty much at the same rate and same kind of pattern and kind of look as my Hoya curtisii, which I love my curtisii, so I know I'm going to be happy with this plant. Okay, let's move to another part of the bedroom. Okay, so up next we have my oh so beautiful Calathea warskowesii. Absolutely adore this plant. We did repot this plant back in, I think it was February. I think it was in the 1 year anniversary for the channel video. And if you guys follow me on Instagram or Facebook at Aloha Plant Life, you will already know the exciting thing that is happening again. So I had told you guys this time last year that this plant had decided to flower for the first time. So if we look at what this plant looked like last year, should look a bit bigger to you guys, definitely looks a bit bigger to me, but you can see the flowers from last year that had shot up. There were 4 in total. It happened on New Year's Day, and this year on New Year's Day, I also woke up and noticed we are getting flowers again. So you can't actually see the flower yet, it hasn't emerged, but these flowers on this plant come in with 2 leaves like this that are slightly smaller than the rest of the leaves on the plant, and then a little white flower will emerge from in between those 2 leaves. So we have 1 here, we've got 1 coming in over here, so that's 2, there's 1 right here, that's 3. So I am thinking we might end up with a 4th shooting out from somewhere over here, and you can see there is like a new something popping out there. We've got a new, I think this is going to be just a regular leaf, but it could be a flower coming out here. But yeah, so that's pretty exciting. I don't know what that is all about. I guess maybe we're just always going to flower on New Year's Day, but once again, I'm not going to mind that at all. That's an excellent way to start the new year. So I will leave those flowers on there for a while. Once they are spent, what I will end up doing is propagating this plant, because I also showed you guys early this year how you can actually propagate these flowers, because they do actually emerge from a node. So that is a node right there. And that is the only real way you can propagate via water, cutting in water off of this plant, unless you dig part of the rhizome out from underneath the soil and cut there. Then you can put that into water and it will propagate and survive. But the flowers are just the easiest way to go as far as I'm concerned, and especially if it's going to do it once every year and give me at least 4 flowers, that's just how I will continue to propagate this plant. But absolutely love it. Can't wait to see how much larger it gets this year. Given how quickly it spreads, we will probably have to repot this one as well. And once again, it's not going to fit here if we put it in a bigger pot, so we may have to divide it out. But moving on down here, this poor plant. This is my Rhaphidophora tetrasperma, which is not going to be looking its best because it did probably suffer somewhat the worst from the fertilizer burn situation in terms of like what happened to its leaves. As you can see, that is related to the fertilizer burn. Now, the roots have stayed fine on this plant, and so I think we'll be okay. I think we're just going to lose these leaves that were affected, but they still have enough green on them to be photosynthesizing, so I didn't want to just go cutting them all off right away and then potentially cause a bigger problem with the plant. I just wanted to kind of leave it alone. But as you can see, we do still have new growth coming in up here at the top. The new growth does look okay, so I think we are going to be fine. We definitely don't look as good as last year because of the way those leaves look, but we might look a tiny bit more full. I'm not sure. There are multiple vines that we potted up in this pot, and some of them have been slower to kick off than others, so it may not be super noticeable, but I did cut probably about 6 feet off the top of this plant over the course of this year. So just imagine, I said 6 feet. I did not mean 6 feet. Did I mean 6 feet? No, I meant probably like 4 feet. I don't know where 6 came from. Definitely, I think I propagated it 4 times, and I usually took about a foot off at a time. So you can imagine how tall it would have been if I hadn't done that. And part of the reason I did that was to give the smaller vines at the bottom a chance to catch up to the 2 tallest ones that were already longer vines when we potted everything up in here. But also, I really like this stained pole that I have, but the girl that was making these, she was supposed to reopen her Etsy shop in the spring, and she never did. So I can't get a matching pole for this. So we might have to change this pole out at some point, which is a shame, but we'll do what we have to do. But right now I'm just worried about this plant making a recovery from the fertilizer burn. And yeah, I think once again, it'll be okay. It's just going to take a little while. Okay, let me reposition and adjust lighting for our Tradescantia. Okay, so this is my Tradescantia fluminescens albovitata. We are looking a little bit yellowish, chlorotic looking, not everywhere. You can see some of these leaves are still really green, but this plant is due for another root pruning. It's what I always do because I like to keep it in this planter here on the wall. So whenever it starts to misbehave like this and starts to get more yellowing leaves, which you can see, and yellowing vines, you can see there's more yellow over here on this side, but it's not bad. Once again, there's a lot of new stuff coming in at the top that's green. I just know this is because this plant is severely root bound. It gets root bound so fast, you guys. And every time what I do is I just root prune it. I take 1/3 of the bottom portion of the roots off, and then I usually will trim a little bit off the sides on this plant as well. And then I'll pot it back up. I'll give it a trim. Like I'll take some of these vines down a little bit too, so there's a good ratio of foliage to roots. And then from there, she just reestablishes, and all that yellowing will eventually, I will cut that off and it will all get replaced with new, nice bright green growth. So you can see what she looked like last year. I had recently root pruned her last year when we did this video last year. So that is why she was looking nice and lovely last year. I really should have root pruned her a couple of months ago, and then she would have been looking like that this year. But all in all, not too bad. That is just something that happens with these plants. As I mentioned in my care guide for Tradescantia plants, it happens and you just cut them back and then they come back. I mean, they grow like weeds, you guys. So, and I definitely have propagated a lot off of her. If I had not cut her at all this year, she would be like dragging across the floor. That's just how quickly they grow. But she will get back to looking good here shortly, and definitely has really done just about the same as she always does over the course of this year. Okay, let me drop this curtain because I was having to hold it up so we had better light for that plant. But let's see if our lighting is okay for Maria down here. Maria is called Maria because she is an Aglaonema Maria. So in case you guys haven't figured it out yet, all my plants that have names, it's because they came with a built-in name, like Maria, or like Rose was the Rosa Picta Calathea, etc. None of my plants are named like arbitrarily. And as far as genders go, because somebody commented on one of my videos recently about why is it a she, I don't know, you guys. Sometimes I just refer to them as a she or a he. I don't really think about it. It's just how it comes out. And some of them, sometimes I refer to them as she's and sometimes I refer to them as he's. I don't know. It's a fluid thing. Don't ask. It just feels weird to call them it's to me. But anyways, Maria here is probably looking about the same as Maria did last year. Maybe a little bit fuller, but she's not exactly the fastest grower. So I don't think we're going to notice a huge difference, but she's definitely been happier living here in my bedroom than where I originally had her, which was in my office. These plants are often marketed as low light plants, but I'm here to tell you right now, they're plants that are marketed as low light typically are low light tolerant, meaning they'll put up with it, but they don't necessarily like it. However, in my experience, Aglaonema don't really put up with it well. They tend to get very stretched out looking, losing a lot of leaves, and she has just definitely done way better here in a brighter situation. She's still not getting that much light, you guys, because she's off to the side of this west-facing door, which, as you can see, is blocked by part of my house on the other side, and then very off to the side from the southern facing windows. So it's not like she's getting a ton of light here, but it's definitely brighter levels of indirect light than she was getting in the north facing windows in my office. But she has done pretty well, like I said, and definitely though just hardly ever have to repot her. She takes so long to fill in, you guys. Even though she's growing more quickly and better in this brighter light, she still just doesn't spread her roots around as quickly as some of my other plants. But let me get us repositioned in the windows. Okay, so I think we'll start here with my string of dolphins in this window, and this plant has definitely grown a lot since the last time you saw it. The last time you saw it, it was 2 separate plants. It is now just 1, but honestly, you guys, if you can see, we have lost quite a few dolphins lately because I just have not been on top of the watering. I've been letting it go a little bit too long. So I need to trim these kind of barren vines back. I did already drop some vines and dolphins back up in the top there, so hopefully we will get some new growth coming in. I just need to clean it up. It's sometimes really hard with string of plants to keep them looking good if you don't really have your watering dialed in, and then it can take a little bit to get them back to looking their best, but we will get there. At least we have definitely thrived this year because this plant was a plant that had been severely overwatered and then severely underwatered when I acquired it, and I basically had to rehab it back to life. So at least we were successful in that regard. Okay, let me resituate once more. Okay, so down below where the string of dolphins is, we have my Ficus elasticas. This is my Ficus elastica ruby right here. And a lot of you guys have been asking me lately about your rubies and saying that they aren't looking very pink. It can happen. You can see down here at the bottom, she's lost a lot of her pink. And that's not entirely unexpected. As the leaves age, they can lose some of that pinkness, but also you can see only her top leaves are above this wall line. She is still getting light from the giant window over here though on those lower leaves, but she is being partially blocked by my Ficus elastica teneke over here, which we will look at in a second. So these leaves aren't getting as much light. That could also account for why they have lost their pink. But in general, they still tend to come in more pink up at the top in my experience. But it is just something that can happen. So if you ever find yourself with both of these plants and you're like, well, they look the same now, I mean, you can always just unload one and like sell it to someone or gift it to someone. But you can see too, the stems on the ruby stay way more pink. Look how pink that is compared to, for example, what you're seeing in there is nowhere near as pink. So there is that aspect to it as well. Now, in general, ruby is probably looking a little bit taller than last year, I think, but not crazy taller. She actually has not grown as much as like I expected her to, just based on how quickly she typically grows. I definitely think my Ficus elastica teneke, which here comes the sun, you guys. We may have to pick this back up in a bit to look at this one because it's going to be difficult. Definitely think my Ficus elastica teneke has grown way more than ruby here, but she still held her own. And just a reminder, these are technically trees, you guys, so like eventually they're going to get quite large. So it's a good thing that I have extremely high ceilings in this bedroom, in case you can't tell. So when these plants get big, and you just got a little bit of a glimpse of how tall the teneke over here has gotten, when they get big, this is probably the room that they will have to live in, either here or in my upstairs living room, because it also has really high ceilings. But all right, we are going to have to revisit the teneke when the sun is not blaring through the windows. It does look like clouds might be moving in, so we'll pick it back up here in a bit. All right, you guys, well, the clouds actually came back over pretty quickly there. We still have a little bit of brightness going on, but hopefully you can see okay and see how tall my teneke, which I call Tink for short, has gotten. It's almost as tall as me. And one of the things, though, also, if you'll notice compared to when we were looking at ruby, I find that there is a greater margin of white around the edges of the leaves on the teneke than there is on the ruby. Hopefully you can tell the difference there. So even though she loses some of her pink, she still looks pretty different, at least in my experience with my 2 that I own here. Now, this time last year, this plant had just started to branch. Let me come around here. Branch out from this point right here. And I think in the footage you're seeing from last year, we maybe had this much growth off of where it had branched. And now we are all the way up to here. So this plant has definitely grown a lot, definitely loves these bright southern facing windows here. It definitely is growing a little bit wonky, which is not unexpected. I have started to refer to this as the Leaning Tower of Tink, because where it branched and just in general, it started trying to lean this way. I need to notch it again and try and get an offshoot from further down to go this way to try to balance it out. I do have a stake in here just because of that. If you guys can see that right there. I have staked her to this, or staked him. See, this is one of those plants where I'm like, it's a him, and if I call it a her, I feel wrong. I don't know why. It just is. But I have staked him up just because we are getting a little bit top heavy. Now, I can completely chop the top of this off, and that will forcibly branch it and help resolve the issue. But I just don't want to wait for it to get this tall again. So I think we're going to do another notching, and we are going to probably do it a little bit differently. There's a new thing that I am going to be experimenting with here in the next few days for you guys that I think will make it happen more quickly and increase the odds of success, because I think I told you guys, I'm probably going to quote this wrong. I think it's like 60% chance of success with notching. That's why you always want to do more than just one, because you could do like 4 and maybe only 1 would actually take. It's just kind of how it is with notching, and it's different on different plants. Like I find some plants take to notching better than others. So don't get too discouraged if it doesn't work on like the first try. Once again, you can just cut a big section of your plant off, and that should help to force some new offshoots from below as well. But super happy with how these 2 plants have done. Okay, moving on over here. Let's address this real quick. Once again, we did look at this plant in my Naughty and Nice video recently. This is my Graptovaria that is attempting to grow back. Hopefully you can see that little bit of growth over there on the right side. Here's what it looked like last year, but we did behead this and propagate it because it was getting a little bit exfoliated and grown out and leggy looking, and now we're just waiting for it to fill back in, basically. So over here though, and I feel like the lighting is still funky. Okay. Let me try and adjust real quick. Okay, hopefully that lighting is a little bit better. This is my Hoya carnosa compacta variegata, and this plant has definitely grown for me this year. Hopefully you guys can tell the difference. We've gotten a lot more length on various vines in this pot, and it is just doing absolutely fabulously. We have a new branch vine, shooting out up here. I just absolutely love this plant. I love it. It is definitely not one of my fastest growing Hoyas, but it definitely has done quite a bit of growing for me this year, and definitely loves living in the southern facing window. But this time of year, because we are getting that direct light, hopefully you can see we are getting a little bit of a tinge of reddish pinkishness here, which is from sun stressing, but that's okay. It's not hurting the plant or anything like that, and it will go away in the summertime when we don't get direct light in these windows. Okay, moving on. If we can see this plant. All right, I'm gonna move these plants out of the direct window, you guys. 1 second. Okay, I really thought with the cloud coverage we would be okay in here, but apparently not. They're just huge windows, you guys. Lots and lots of light, which is great for the plants, not great for filming. Okay, this is my Haworthia. I will flash the full scientific name up on screen for you. Also sometimes referred to as a zebra plant by some people, but we're gonna look at another plant in a second, which is what I think of when I hear a zebra plant. Now, this plant has definitely grown for me. It's probably looking a little bit taller this year than last year, but it's also kind of getting a little bit grown out. As you can see here, the base is looking really narrow. It's not as compact in the soil, and it is pupping. So this is a succulent type plant, and it reproduces via pupping, which means it just creates little babies of itself, like you see right there off of the base of the mama plant. So we're gonna need to repot this year for sure, and at that time we will probably divide out some of these babies and plant the mama back down a little bit deeper so we don't look quite so stretched out. But definitely love this plant. Perfect if you want a plant that's going to stay small and that will work in a bright full sun window. All right, let me set this guy back. Okay, I just want you to see where everybody's living before I grab them real quick to put them in better light, but we're going to look at my Echeveria here next. All right, so this is another succulent, more similar to the Graptovaria, which I know you didn't look like much right now, but we're going to get to see another Graptovaria here in a second. Actually, it's the original propagation I did off that one we looked at a minute ago. But this plant, absolutely love it with this rosette type shape and the beautiful coloration on these leaves. Now, this plant has gotten definitely taller than last year, but we're also growing very wonky-like. So we're going to need to behead and replant this at some point this year. So basically this will start to look like that Graptovaria we just looked at, where it'll just be a bare stem in this pot for a while, but once we cut this off and replant it, then it'll start to push out new growth from the stem that's left in this pot, and it will be tighter to the top of the pot than it is currently, but absolutely love this plant. Okay, let me grab the Hoya tricolor next. Actually, you guys, I think the lighting in this direction is okay. So we can look at this plant where it lives. Now, I did not have this plant at the time that I did this video last year. I did acquire this one back in, I want to say maybe February or March, I believe. And it has definitely done quite a bit of growing for me. As you can see here, we do have new growth coming in here. There's some more over on the other side as well, but definitely is doing well. It was a pretty established plant at the time that I bought it. So that is part of the reason that I'm getting decent amount of new growth going on. Typically when you buy Hoya smaller, if they aren't super well rooted, they're just going to spend more time developing the roots than really pushing out growth at first. But this one was already really well developed in terms of its root system. So once again, this is a Hoya carnosa, sometimes referred to as a crimson queen, sometimes referred to as a exotica tricolor or tricolor exotica. Just know it's the same plant. You can see we do have some sun stressing going on here where we've got some reddishness going on those leaves, but once again, nothing to be worried about, and that will go away with time as soon as we start not having direct light coming in these windows. And then of course, like on most Hoyas, the new growth comes in quite pretty and pink before hardening off into these other colors. So super happy to have this plant here. It definitely helps to balance out what's going on in the windowsill here. Absolutely love it. All right, moving on to this windowsill. We have the Graptovaria. That was the first Graptovaria I had that we propagated off of that little plant that looks like nothing right now. And you can see just how big and beautiful this one has gotten. I wasn't originally intending to sell this, and I just can't because it's just so pretty. I cannot even with it. And I don't even think I have footage from last year for it because it was probably with my propagations and I wasn't planning on keeping it in my permanent collection. So I don't even think we have anything to compare it to, but it's just gotten massive though, you guys. Okay, here is the Pilea glauca, which of my plants that I owned this last year, the mama of this plant is the only plant that I had that completely died off. I don't know what happened to it. Vines just started drying up and more vines started drying up, and I got nervous, and so I cut all of the good healthy vines off at the lower part of the plant. So that's what this was. I literally just grabbed it like a ponytail, cut it, and propagated it and potted it back up. So we don't really have, well, I can show you what mama looked like last year. So baby is gonna have to catch back up to mama, but not looking too horrible as a starter plant. And hopefully things will go better this time. I did move it here into this southeast facing window from a north window in my office just to see if maybe some more light would help. So far, we're doing pretty good though. So fingers crossed, things don't go awry this year with this plant again. Okay, I'm gonna have to resituate again so we can look at the string of bananas that's above you. Okay, you guys, so string of bananas got spider mites last year, and because of that, we lost a lot of our bananas. So if you can see, we are not exactly looking very full and lush at the top. We probably looked way better last year because I don't think we'd gotten the spider mites yet, or at least I didn't know they were on there yet last year. Actually, I take that back. We might have already had the spider mites, so we might not have been looking that great last year, but I feel like we probably still looked a little bit better than we do now. But once again, that just kind of happens sometimes on string of plants. And you can see down here at the bottom, we've got tons of bananas. No problems here at the bottom. But that's kind of what happens. They'll tend to die off at the top first, and then you've got what looks a little bit bald up there, and then a lot better down here. And I did recently have to give her a haircut as well because we were getting too long. But it's just going to take time. What I've been doing is I've slowly been cutting some of these super bald vines like you see here where it's just nothing on it, cutting a few back at a time all the way to the top. And then any of the good bananas that are down here at the bottom, like I'll replant them back in the top to help fill it in, but it's just going to take time, you guys. It's a patience game with these plants. It really is. And you never want to cut too much back at once though, because then you run the risk of the plant not being able to use its water up as quickly. And that's how we end up with root rot problems on these plants. But we'll get it back looking good. It's just going to take time, like I said. Okay, I think we got 1, 2, 3, 4 more plants to look at in here. Let's go ahead and move on to my Caladium Hilo Beauty. And this plant should be looking, hopefully, a lot better. It might not be looking as tall because this plant also is a spider mite magnet. Between this plant and my Calathea White Fusion that we're going to look at in the bathroom, it was a hot mess, but we finally managed, with the help of beneficial mites, to get rid of the spider mites on both of those plants over the course of this past spring. So I haven't really seen anything lately that looks like we have a problem, but I went ahead and gave it a sachet of beneficial mites again, just in case something's going on that I can't see yet. But we definitely had a lot of corms down there in the soil kick off, and you see we've got a ton of new growth. It's not just one plant shoot anymore. This is the only leaf I think right now on the original plant shoot, and it looks like it's about to kill that one off, but that's okay. That's just kind of what happens over time. But all in all, it's doing better. Now this plant, hands down, you guys, does better in the summertime. It has nothing, I think, to do with the lighting. It's just in nature, that is what this plant does. And I know I always say that my plants don't know that it's spring or summer or winter in my house for the most part, but I feel like this one does. I just feel like it knows, and it just does not grow as much in the fall and winter, more so in the winter here because our falls are pretty mild. They're actually still pretty warm for the most part. But during the spring and the summer, it will definitely kick off, and these leaves will start to come in way bigger and way taller. And then late fall, all the big tall leaves, like this one was, will start to die off, and then I'll just be left with kind of these lower, smaller leaves until the springtime again. But all in all, we are doing way better just because, in my book, we don't have bugs. Okay, guys, so next up we have my Aphelandra squarosa, which is commonly also referred to as a zebra plant. Now, this plant definitely grew a lot from what you're seeing from last year, but unfortunately we also lost a bunch of leaves. So definitely a much taller. I did lose leaves the year before, but not to this extent. So I am going to need to do something about this plant. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a little bit sculptural looking. It's not exactly like that horrible, but it also looks ridiculous now being on a plant stand. I really probably need to like move it to the floor, but I haven't decided yet. I think we're going to try the new notching method that I was mentioning on this plant first to see if we can't get some growth to come back in down here. And then if that doesn't cut it, then we might actually have to cut it and cut these down and propagate them. But I wouldn't want to obviously do them all at once because then there would be nothing to support the plant basically. So I would just have to do them one at a time, which is going to look awkward, but sometimes, once again, that is just what you have to do. Now, the reason for the leaf loss is probably my fault. This plant is very particular about not like going too long between waterings, and it has gotten to the point where I have to water it like every 3 days. And if I don't water it exactly every 3 days, it throws a fit and drops leaves. Also, whenever I move this plant, it's a little bit sensitive to dropping leaves, so I try to just bring a tray in here and water it, just take it out and put it on the floor and water it that way, because it's just a little bit finicky like that. But I absolutely love the way this plant looks, and so I really just want to try to get it back to looking its best. So that is the goal for this plant this year. Okay, over here on my nightstand, we have my beautiful, yes, I can talk, beautiful pearls and jade pothos. And this plant should look way better, way bigger, way more beautiful than it did last year because it has really taken off. I feel like we're a little bit bright on the light here. Hold on. Take that lighting down just a little bit. Hopefully that's a little bit better. But yes, this plant has really taken off this year. Definitely the choice to move it over here to the nightstand was a good one. At first, I thought it might be too much light, especially this time of year where it gets kind of direct light for part of the day, but it really finally took off when I made the decision to move it over here, and it is now growing almost close to the same rate. I feel like as my Marble Queen Pothos, not quite, little bit slower for sure, but not horribly slower, but we do have some leaf damage down here from guess who? Mr. Theo, of course. But definitely we have propagated this one quite a few times this year, which we had never needed to propagate it before. So that's always a good sign. And we are we're definitely going to have to repot this one in the spring. And I might once again, because I don't know if I want to make it, if I take it up bigger, I might not be able to leave it here on the nightstand. So we might actually divide it out, some of the vines. I don't know, I haven't fully decided yet. The problem I'm having right now, you guys, is some of these repots now, it's like, I feel like I have to rearrange my whole house, and I don't want to rearrange my whole house in terms of my plants, but that may be what has to happen this year. So we may be doing like massive reordering around this household, but definitely this plant has done good for me this year. Super happy about it. All right, you guys, so here we are in my master bathroom, which is notoriously hard to film in, but I wanted to get you a wide shot first of my Marantas so I can compare with a wide shot from last year and you can kind of see what's going on. Now, Big Mama here, my red Maranta, definitely has fared better this year than the other two, but we're gonna get closer up so that you can see a little bit more of what's going on. Okay guys, so once again, please excuse the sachets of beneficial mites, but if we compare my lemon lime Maranta here to last year, not necessarily looking less full on top, but if we come down here and we look at the trailing part, definitely a little bit less full here, but that's not surprising. This plant has been losing quite a few leaves because, as I mentioned to you guys, I did realize recently that the bottom of the pot, there's no dirt. There's like a concave section of rhizomes with no dirt. So on my list to do today is actually to repot this into a slightly deeper pot, and that should resolve the issue because I know hands down that that's why this plant has been losing a lot of leaves. But all in all, it still doesn't look that bad. Now, if we move on to Big Mama here, Big Mama has lost a lot of leaves as well. Let me reposition 1 second, you guys. All right, you guys, I think this is a little bit better for lighting, hopefully. Okay, so my red Maranta here has also lost a lot of leaves this year, but I'm not too concerned about it because she's kept pushing out a ton of new growth. There's a new leaf here. There's a new leaf coming in over here. One right here. So not that big of a deal, but I do think we're going to be due for a repot this spring because I have noticed on the back side, I can't really get to it right now to show you, but we do have rhizomes growing out of the drainage holes that are now growing leaves. So there's whole vines coming out of the drainage holes. So definitely we need to check for a repot. But as far as the trailing part of this plant goes, let me reposition. Once again, you guys, the troubles of filming in this bathroom are real. Okay, so as you can see, we probably don't look like we're trailing quite as much, but that's because I recently had to remove a whole set of vines that were starting to go down into the bathtub here. So that is the only time I have propagated this plant this year though. So all in all, I think still looking about the same as last year, despite having lost a bunch of leaves and having me propagate that part. But let's move on to the green Maranta. And for anybody new here, I did recently repot this plant as well because it had started losing a ton of leaves. I'm sure you can tell based on what it looks like now. Let me move this for a second. You can see how that leaf is kind of looking funky. I was starting to get stuff like that on a lot of leaves, losing a lot of leaves recently, and I decided perhaps we needed a repot to solve the situation, but I really should have repotted it sooner because that's why this plant doesn't look as great as it did last year, but it is starting to take off, you guys, now. You can probably see here, that is a brand new leaf right there with the darker spots, and then we have that new one coming out there as well, and we have a new one coming out back there. So I think the repot is what this plant wanted. So hopefully we're gonna start to fill back in again. I don't know why. This one has always grown slightly slower for me, you guys, than my other Marantas, for sure. But I just don't know why it just all of a sudden started having some issues. It wasn't even that root bound. I mean, so it was fairly root bound, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It wasn't as bad as some of the other plants we repotted in that video. So I'm really hoping that we make a turnaround and start to get looking closer to what we looked like this time last year, and hopefully it happens pretty soon. But two more plants, sorry, to look at in here. Let me see if I can get the chordatum right. We may have to wait until the lighting changes in here, but we'll see. Okay guys, I know this lighting is probably not gonna be fantabulous, but here is my philodendron chordatum. And this plant has also been giving me some problems recently. So I did recently repot it, and I just did a pot extension. Hopefully you can see I just added some plastic to the top there so that I could put more dirt underneath, because all the roots were kind of like on some of my other plants that we're looking at swirled around down in the bottom. And I was starting to get a lot of yellowing leaves and losing leaves, and so I decided to do that. And then we lost even more leaves, so hopefully you can see some of these vines look a little barren right now. So that's not entirely unexpected. Repotting, sometimes plants throw a fit. So all in all, this plant is probably gonna look a little bit less full than last year, but a lot of that too might just be because the vines are a little bit more spread out now from when I repotted it. They aren't quite clustered all together. I kind of spanned them out a little bit, but also, like I said, we have lost some leaves, so that is going to affect it. But we are still putting out new leaves, and hopefully you guys can see up in here that the roots are starting to spread down into the bottom of this pot again already. So I don't know. I don't even know. Hopefully that's all it needed, and we will start to stage a comeback, and then eventually I'm gonna have to like propagate this back because this is not looking very great. But right now I don't want to cut too much foliage off because it needs it to be able to support itself after the repot. So not looking its best right now, but we will get it back to its full glory sometime this year. But let's move on. We got one more plant to look at. All right, guys, so this is our last plant here in the bathroom. And just a quick reminder, this is an east-facing window. All of these plants absolutely love that level of light. They also probably like that this is frosted glass, so when there is direct light coming through, it's not quite as harsh. And they definitely love the humidity from the shower. But this is my Calathea White Fusion. And if you've been here for a while, you know how much I love this plant. If you are new, this is one of my favorite plants. Now, she has not been without issue, but the only issue I have really had with her is spider mites. I have had to cut her pretty much all the way back to the soil twice now in efforts to battle and eradicate spider mites. The last time I did that was back in May, but every time I do it, she comes back bigger and more beautiful, and I actually think she looks more beautiful now than she did last year. Now, at this point last year, there's a possibility she still had spider mites and I just didn't know it yet, but she was looking pretty good this time last year as well. But this year, knock on wood, I don't have anything not wood to knock on right now, but so far I have not seen, since back in May, I have not seen any signs of more spider mites. She does have a mite sachet hanging down in her leaves there just in case, because normally it's a little bit after this time of year is when I start suddenly seeing signs of spider mite damage on her. So we're just being extra preventative this year. But I will say beneficial mites seem to be what cured her of spider mites earlier this year. And thankfully we have not seen a resurgence, but she is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, I know a lot of people have other problems with theirs beyond like pests, but they're just so resilient, and she grows back on her own. Even when I cut her back, you guys, I can't believe she grew back this fast. Like, she just looks gorgeous. And I probably do need to check her to see if she needs to be repotted. I don't think I've repotted her in about 2 years, 2.5 years. I don't know, probably be 3 years by the time spring rolls around. So we definitely probably need to give her a looks over and see if we need to be repotted, but she does live pretty far back from this window, so she's not going to get root bound nearly as quickly as some of my other plants, and nowhere near as quick as the ones actually in the window. But I just can't. I rave about her all the time, and I know some people out there just absolutely hate Calatheas, and you probably hate seeing this one. I don't know. Maybe you're mad that you can't get yours to look that way, or it just reminds you of the ones you've had and lost. But it is possible to keep them looking beautiful like this. I do have a video on how I care for all of my prayer plant family plants, including my Calatheas, my Marantas, my Stromanthes, my Tenanthes. I will place a link in the description below for you guys. I literally do what I outline in that video, and that is basically it. And they've all done fabulously for me. But let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so I think we'll start with my rattlesnake Calathea that I have here on my desk. Now, we did recently repot this, and the plant is throwing a little bit of a fit on some of its oldest leaves here, getting a little bit crispy. We're probably going to lose them, but that's not that unexpected after repotting plants, especially calatheas like this or other prayer plant family plants. They just tend to be a little bit more sensitive to everything, but all in all, this plant has gotten a little bit more full over this last year, as you can see, but not a huge change, not entirely unexpected though, because it does live pretty far back from the windows, and these are north-facing windows in this room, but I'm fine with it. All in all, it still looks beautiful, and if it gets too big, it's not going to fit on my desk, so I'm fine with it staying slightly smaller than my other ones. But let's move on to the plants by the windows, and I think we will start over here, but I'm not sure how well our lighting's going to go. Let's just head over this way and see if the lighting stays good or not. It's just sometimes really hard in these windows to get it just right, but that actually looks absolutely glowing and beautiful right now with the way the light is coming in. So this is my Syngonium white butterfly. I think she looks a little bit bigger and fuller than last year when we did this tour, but we have also propagated this plant a lot. I mean, a lot. We took a lot of low-hanging vines off this plant. We do still have some low-hanging ones on the other side. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see them. Let me see. So there you go. These are the ones that we didn't remove. I probably do need to trim and propagate once again, but I was trying to wait for this side to grow in a little bit more from where we previously cut stuff off. That is why I have that side facing the window right now instead of this side, which is fine though, because this side looks beautiful and that's what you're gonna see anyway. But once again, I really feel like she's grown really well this year. I probably need to repot her come spring, I am sure, but definitely a beautiful, beautiful plant. This has been my year of Syngoniums. I just really have been falling in love with Syngoniums this year. Like, I really want to get more. I just don't really have room to put anywhere else right now. But I absolutely love them. They are pretty laid back, easygoing plants. They are just so resilient and they can just look so beautiful so easily. I prefer mine bushy like this. This is why we have been trimming and propagating this one back. But definitely a gorgeous, gorgeous plant. Once again, maybe hasn't grown as much as some of my other plants, but more probably because of the fact that it's in a north-facing window, but still looking beautiful. Okay, let me get down lower here so we can talk about my Begonia maculata, because some things happened. So you guys are probably thinking, whoa, last time I saw your Begonia maculata, it was huge. It was not this small. Well, you guys, she got a little bit out of hand this year. She got massive and it was just too much. She was way too big. We were starting to lose lower leaves and our lower stems were just kind of looking kind of bare. And I was just at my wit's end one day and decided, you know what, let's start over. So basically I chopped her all up and restarted her from scratch, gave away all of the other propagations and everything, or sold them. Very popular plant, by the way, when it comes to my plant sales for sure. And then this is the part of her that I kept to restart and keep at a manageable size. So as you can see, we are just looking absolutely beautiful. I love this plant so much, especially right now where we are with the light shining through the back of the leaves. It's making this plant look very gorgeous, especially that new leaf looks almost pink. It's not actually pink though, you guys. The only reason these colors look this way is because the back side of the leaf is red. But absolutely love this plant, and I am loving it even more now that I have decided to restart her from a smaller size, because I kid you not, you guys, it was out of control. Like, I couldn't even keep her staked up enough. She was so big, and you can see here what she looked like last year. Massive last year. Now imagine like double that size. And it was just crazy. I mean, she was like not fitting anywhere. So that's why we are starting over. These are just such prolific and like fast growing plants though, that it's really easy to do that if it gets out of control for you. And I am going to need to probably figure out giving her a better support. She is supported by one lonely little chopstick in the back there, but you can see we're going to need to get this supported at some point. Although I kind of like the hang when they're small like this, but as they start to get bigger, which is once again going to happen very quickly for this plant, it can start to look really unruly. This is also probably not where she is going to continue living. It was the best spot right now for her, but I need to put her somewhere else. And that's another issue I've been having when she got so big, was I just didn't know where to put her. She got just kind of in the way in my bedroom, and then I had her upstairs for a while, but I don't think she liked the lighting in that corner in the upstairs living room. So at some point this year, we're gonna have to figure out a better place for this gal to live. But let's move on over here, and let's start, if I can get the lighting good here, for the Thaumatophyllum bipinnatifidum, which, you guys, has put out so many new leaves. So here's what this plant looked like this time last year, and you can tell not as full looking. Now, I will say I have started staking up the leaves. You can probably see the little stakes up there at the top. That is helping to make this plant look better. I don't think it was staked up when we filmed last year at all, if I recall correctly. So that might be part of why it's looking more full, but it has definitely put out a ton of new leaves. Now, we did get a little bit of fertilizer burn, if you recall from the fertilizer burn video on this plant. So that's why we have some of this yellowing that you're seeing here, but it's not affecting all the leaves. It's not really spreading. I mean, I guess maybe this leaf looks kind of like it spread it a little bit on it, but most of the other leaves are still looking okay. The newer leaves that have come, we need a dust, you guys. Can you see that? Ugh. All right. After I'm done filming, I am dusting this plant. So sorry, plant. Oh, so dusty. But we have these big, beautiful new leaves that are still coming in, and you can see how non-dusty and super shiny they are. This plant cracks me up, you guys. This almost looks fake to me. I mean, look at that. That doesn't even look real, but it's real. It's a real plant, and it just is amazing to me how this plant grows. But we do get a little bit crazy, so I end up having to Velcro them to themselves, the leaves to themselves, to supports and everything, so that this plant is not just kind of hanging and looking like it's trying to be a trailing plant when it's not. But down here we have my aluminum plant, aka Pilea caderii. I almost blinked on the name there for a second, you guys. And this plant probably looks a little bit bigger, I guess, than last year, but honestly, we are also a little bit balder. This is the better side of this plant right now for you to be looking at. Absolutely love the silver variegated leaves on this one. Now, this plant does look a little bit yellow on some of these leaves as well. This also kind of started after the fertilizer situation, so I'm thinking that's what that's related to. We have been propagating this plant a lot, and if you can see, let me turn this plant around for you so you can see over here, because this is what was going on. We were losing a bunch of leaves. We're getting bare branches like this. So I've been in the process of cutting these back, and then we're getting new growth coming in down here at the bottom that is helping to fill it back in. There's some new growth right there as well. So all in all, this plant kept growing nicely for me, but it just started looking leggy and weird. So now what we're doing is we're cutting it back down to get it to bush out more and fill back in and look a little bit better, a little bit closer to what it looked like last year. But all in all, not too shabby. This plant drives me crazy, you guys. I mean, I talk about it all the time. It drops leaves like this. It's just a little bit of a pain in the butt. I don't know. The watering is tricky on this one. Like, it likes to be kept pretty moist, but you can't go too moist or you start getting edema on the leaves, which I think you might be able to see. See if the camera will focus. If not, I think I'm gonna have to film it with my iPhone so I can get closer up and I can show you, but there's little bubble looking things on the leaves. That's what happens when plants get a little bit too much water and they start having it build up in the tissue in the leaves, and it forms these little like bubble pimple looking things, and it can present in different ways, you guys. Like, they're pretty small bubbles on this plant, but I've seen on plants with like larger leaves, it can be like a huge spot like this big that bubbles up underneath the surface. But basically it's just really tricky, like I said, with this plant, because it doesn't want to dry out too much or it'll start dropping leaves. But if you give it water too soon, you start getting the edema. So kind of an annoying plant, but still a beautiful plant. But once again, I may be purging this plant out of my collection this year. I do need to consider doing some more purging this year at some point. And this one might be going. Not 100% sure yet, but maybe like 80% sure. I will be sure to let you guys know though if I do purge it. Okay, I need to we have some plants way up in the top windows over here, so I'm gonna get those down so we can take a look at those next. All right, you guys, so none of these plants were in my collection last year, so I don't have comparison pictures to show you. I got all of these plants back in, I think, April, I believe, from one of you guys who lives in Hawaii. So this is my philodendron lemon lime, called a lemon lime because the leaves come in kind of that yellowish color and then turn to this beautiful green. Now these were just cuttings that this person sent me, and so I did pot them up after I received them, and we are starting to put out a ton of new growth on this one right here especially. Now this plant, all of these plants, my plan is once they get more mature and start to trail more is to use these in the living wall. I keep telling you guys that I want to create in my master bathroom, but they're gonna look a little funky if we put them up there like this right now. So I really wanna wait for them to get a little bit more mature first. But this one is definitely the one that's taken off the most in just the last few weeks. And I do probably need to repot these because as you can see, if the camera will focus for me, we are quite a bit root bound in there, and I think most of these are like that. All of them have roots coming out of the bottom already. Let's look at the Syndapsis next. So this is a Syndapsis pictus silver splash, and as you can see, absolutely gorgeous, has way more silver kind of together, modeled together than on, for example, the Syndapsis pictus exotica, but still an absolutely gorgeous plant. And this one has really started kicking off for me recently as well. I think the last time we looked at this, you guys, it was still living in my bedroom, and I was saying that the leaves were looking a little bit lighter than they should because it was getting that southeast facing light, and I think it was just a little bit too much for it. And so since I moved it into the north facing window in here, it has pumped out a bunch more new growth, tons more new leaves. Definitely seems to be happier in here. Now, if we do move these plants in the bathroom, that is a frosted east-facing window, so these plants should be fine with that as well. So I'm not too concerned about it, but I am happy to see that we are starting to kick off some more growth on here. Syndapsis are notorious for being a little bit slow to start growing after you propagate them, so I'm glad that this one is doing something. But as you can see, we also are going straight out of the bottom of the drainage holes here. We're definitely a bit root bound, so we need to take this one up probably in the spring as well. But absolutely gorgeous. Okay, this guy is a neon pothos, so an Epipremnum aureum neon. Beautiful, beautiful yellowish leaves. Sometimes it can be, this one doesn't look as neon to me as some other people's. I don't know if it's because I have it in north facing window or not, but I don't mind it. I'm not mad at it. It's very similar in appearance to me to the lemon lime philodendron, except that lemon lime philodendron, the leaves do get a bit greener over time. But a lot of people sometimes get confused by these plants. So here's a good side-by-side comparison for you to see. The philodendron leaves typically are going to be longer, still heart-shaped, but a bit more of an elongated heart shape. They're a little bit smoother in texture. Your Epipremnum aureums especially tend to have this more, I hope you can tell, slightly rippled texture to it. And then the vines are quite different as well. So very thin, as you can see on the philodendron. This one we are not vining quite enough for me to even show you, but hopefully you can see down in there a little bit. I can show some footage from one of my other ones so you can see, but the vines are just a lot thicker in general on Epipremnum than they are on philodendron. But these are very similar plants, very similar looking. I think I might have featured them in my doppelganger video a while back. So if you struggle with philodendron, but you like the look of this, you could get the Epipremnum instead or vice versa. But this plant has also started to kick off a lot of new growth recently. You can see there's a beautiful new leaf there. So all of these are new leaves here. They are coming in a little bit smaller on both of these plants, but that's not entirely unexpected, especially being in this north-facing window, and just in general, new growth when you have cuttings tends to come in a little bit smaller to start, and then it'll start getting bigger again over time. But absolutely love this plant. My epiprimnums, you guys, are like some of the easiest going plants that I own. Like, I cannot recommend them enough. And I know what's easy for me is not always easy for other people, but they're excellent plants. I mean, they take almost any kind of abuse you can put them through and they will still survive. I've overwatered, I've underwatered. They all just bounce back. Like, they're amazing, amazing plants. And most of them grow relatively quickly. I'm hoping this one is going to be faster growing than, for example, my Pearls and Jade one. That has definitely been the slowest growing for me. Well, actually, my Mandulas, those are probably the slowest growing for me, followed by the Pearls and Jade. Then this guy, which once again though, this was just cuttings, so it's just taking a while to establish its roots, which it is definitely also getting a bit root bound. Took a while to establish its roots and now it's going to start pumping out growth. But my Marble Queen is my fastest growing epiprimnum that I own, hands down. But that is all of the, oh nope, I lied. We have one more plant to look at, but it's in my IKEA cabinet. Give me 1 second to get it out. Okay, so this is my Anthurium Silver Blush. Absolutely love this plant. Now I do not have a comparison photo for this one either because I didn't get this plant until I think right after I filmed the full houseplant tour last year, but we haven't really changed that much. I will say I think we're getting ready to possibly kill off one of our older leaves here. We do look a little bit yellow. Does look like I need to water this plant as well. This one's a little bit yellowish looking too, but the two new leaves look absolutely gorgeous. And it does look like we might be trying to possibly push out a new leaf down there. Yeah, it looks like it as well. So that will be nice. So no big deal if it kills off those oldest leaves, which it's had since a year ago. So not that surprising. Like, leaves eventually will just die off of old age, but absolutely love this plant. I mean, the variegation is so beautiful. I really would like to get some more anthuriums this year as well, you guys. Probably need to do an upcoming updated wish list video for this year, but absolutely love anthuriums. This is the only one that I own in my permanent collection. And I don't remember if I said this yet, you guys, but we are just going to be looking at my permanent collection plants today, not the ones that I have in inventory for sale, just my personal plants. So this is the only anthurium I have in my personal collection, but I definitely would like to change that. So we might be doing that this year. But I'm gonna go water this poor little guy real quick because he looks quite dry, and then we will move on to our next room. All right, you guys, so we are now in my dining room. Once again, these are north-facing windows just like in my office. And here is my beautiful epiprimnum Marble Queen. So Marble Queen Pothos. Absolutely gorgeous. We did recently root prune and repot this gal, and I did have to trim back some of the vines at that time just to balance out the amount of foliage to roots there were, but she seems to be recovering pretty well. We do still have some leaves that are just a little bit yellowish looking, but they were yellowish looking before we did the repot, but she seems to be recovering okay. Now, I will flash up what she looked like last year for you, but remember, this plant grew so much. We have propagated her so many times this year. Hi, Georgie. What are you doing, George? This is a rare appearance, you guys. George rarely makes appearances in videos. He usually doesn't like when I'm filming, which is why he is now probably leaving us. Bye, George. Okay, so like I was saying, we propagated this plant a lot this year. So if I had just let it go and never propagated it, I mean, the vines would be like going all the way like along the floor, into the entryway, etc. So definitely a very, very prolific growing plant, and once again, north-facing windows. So if she was living in a brighter location, the amount of growth I would have gotten over this last year would have been even more. Now down here, we do have my Schismatoglottis plant. Not looking its best right now, but that is partially because we did recently propagate via division this plant, and also because Theo keeps chewing on the ends of the leaves. So a lot of that damage on the ends of the leaves was from Theo. But we are starting to get new growth coming in Hopefully you can see there's new leaves coming in down here at the bottom. So all those new leaves coming in look great. You can see right there, there's no problems on those. It's just these older leaves that Theo had messed with that are just not looking fabulous. But as this plant pumps out new growth and everything, I can cut those off and it will eventually get back to looking like it does in last year's video. As you can see, definitely looking a lot better now. It does look fuller there because we hadn't divided it yet. We literally broke this up into 3 plants. So imagine how much fuller it would have looked. Actually, I can probably show you how full it looked from the division video so you can see before we divided it just how much it had grown over the course of the last year. But absolutely love this plant. I will say it is worse than my alocasia about guttation. That is what some of this on the ends here is just from the plant gutating and pushing water out of the end of those leaves. It is just a trick of getting the watering just right. I mean, you have to be like perfect for it to not guttate, you guys. But also it was massively root bound, which tends to make it do things like that in my experience more so than when it's not. So I'm guessing I will start to see less of that now that we have divided this and repotted it back up and it's not massively root bound anymore. But let me flip you guys around so we can look at the other side of the room. Okay, so next up we have my beautiful Syngonium Glogo. Now this is one of those plants where I think it probably looks a little bit fuller, a little bit nicer in the footage from last year than it does now. But part of that is because I did repot this plant earlier this year. And when I did that, we started losing some of the oldest leaves, but you can see down in here, look at all that new growth that has started to push out. So this just hasn't gotten tall enough to make it look as full as it did from last year. But trust me when I say it has kept growing nonstop. It's just that it got root bound and we were losing some of the oldest leaves. Then when I repotted it, it threw a little bit of a fuss and we lost some of the oldest leaves. But now we're making a full comeback and I am just, oh, look how beautiful all those new baby leaves coming in down there are. And you can see some of these are still a little bit yellow. We're still gonna lose some of these older leaves as well, but no big deal because look at all of that beautiful new growth that is coming in. This is one of my favorite Syngoniums that I own. Definitely a beautiful, beautiful plant. Has much more like pink colored stems than any of my other ones, which I absolutely love as well. But next to her, we have big, beautiful ginger. I don't know what the best angle. And then we also have the Philodendron Brazil trying to grow down into ginger. So we're gonna need to propagate that plant soon. But we did also recently repot Ginger, and she definitely seems to be happier not being all root bound anymore. She does still have some yellow on her leaves, the oldest leaves down here at the bottom, a little bit up here as well, but these are older leaves, but it has stopped happening. Like I'm not getting new leaves yellowing since we repotted her. She is definitely happier and we are pushing out new leaves again because she just can't stop, won't stop growing. But new leaves had not been coming in at the same rate since those leaves started yellowing. And I told you guys that I thought we needed to repot her. She hadn't really been putting out as many new leaves, but now we're starting to get more new leaves coming in. I absolutely love this plant, you guys. So this is a Stromanthe Trio Star, by the way. I don't think I said that. I call her Ginger because commonly referred to as a tricolor ginger plant. And as massive as she is now, I mean, I actually was surprised at how massive she was this time last year. I mean, she's definitely bigger now, and we took her up a pot size, but I just, for some reason, felt like she was even smaller last year than she actually was. But I love this plant, you guys. I know a lot of people out there struggle with these plants. I have never had any problems with her except that she did get like a bacterial infection on her leaves the first year I had her, and she got pretty bald, but then she came back. Once again, north-facing window. She gets water that comes out of the filter in my fridge, like the built-in in the door of my fridge water filtration system. She gets that. She gets fertilized once a month, and I definitely went too long between repotting her this last time. That is the only thing that she was not happy with me about. But other than that, that's really all I do with this plant, you guys. I don't let her dry all the way out. She likes to stay pretty consistently moist. And yeah, she's done fabulously for me, but we're probably gonna have to divide her sometime later this year because I don't think I'm gonna be able to find a pot big enough to put her in. Plus she's gonna start just taking up all of the room over here in the dining room if we don't take her down a little bit this next time that she needs to be repotted. But up above her, we have the very beautiful Philodendron Brazil. Definitely more full than this time last year when we did this video. I mean, we've propagated this plant a lot this year as well. And like I said, I need to give her a trim again right now before she grows down into ginger. But very beautiful plant. Lives part of the year in here in this north facing window. And then usually I put her in one of the southeast facing windows, usually the one in the kitchen, for part of the year as well. But the variegation has maintained pretty well, as you guys can see here, despite being in this north facing window. We haven't gone to like all green leaves or anything like that. We do have like, occasionally we get like the all green, but then the stuff that's coming out underneath that is still variegated. So that happens on this plant. I've never had any issue with this one looking like it was just going to completely revert to all green. If I did start to see that, I would definitely move it to a brighter location. But once again, this plant, I mean, my philodendrons, my trailing philodendrons, and my epipremnums have just all thrived and done absolutely fabulously for me this year. Okay, I do right now have my Cebu Blue pothos up in this window because I just can't make this plant happy. Let me get this plant down and give you a closer look. All right, you guys, so here's my epipremnum Cebu Blue, aka Cebu Blue pothos, and this plant, you guys. Okay, so we repotted this plant back in March. It was doing fine. And then I don't know what happened. It just started giving me yellowing leaves, and then it did fall victim to the fertilizer burn situation. So that's why a lot of this has gotten yellow and I've been losing leaves now. But the roots have stayed pretty good, except for the fact that they are all down there at the bottom, making it look root bound and like it needs to be repotted again, even though we just repotted it back in March. So I'm starting to think maybe I need to just repot it again. I'm also kind of contemplating maybe moving it to leca. It's acting like my syngoniums do, where it sends the root straight down and just swirls. And then it's like they're always thirsty. And so I kind of feel like plants like that do better in semi-hydro, because plants like this and the syngoniums, they can grow in just straight up water. So I might try switching this to leca. I'm not 100% yet, but either way, I think I need to repot it to see if I can't get it to start bouncing back. But all in all, it is looking still more full and better than it did in the video last year, as you can see, but it's not looking its absolute best because it's just been losing a lot of leaves today. You can see, I mean, not today, recently, but you can see that these vines are not looking exactly full and lush. So we're going to have to do something to help this plant out. But that is all of the plants here in the dining room. So let's move to our next room. Okay guys, so we're in the kitchen now. We're going to start over here by this window with my beautiful Scindapsus pictus exotica. Now this plant has definitely filled out a bit for me over the course of the last year. Not crazy amount though, because this plant has also been giving me just runners. I did just recently trim off, you can probably see where I've been cutting off these long runners that were going just way down into some of the plants that I have in my inventory. I am prepping for another plant swap that I'm gonna be a vendor at. So I've got plants out in the kitchen here. That's what those are, if you see those while we're going along. But all in all, it's done pretty well for me this year. I definitely love how it is looking. Definitely another plant that we need to check for a repot here coming up in the springtime. But if we continue to keep getting these runners, I don't know what we're going to do. We might try putting it on some sort of a pole or something. I know some of you had told me just cut it way back up to the top and it'll start pushing out leaves again, but I don't particularly want to do that if I don't have to. Now, I am noticing there is a vine here that is just missing a bunch of leaves that have probably died off at some point. So with vines like that, yes, I might do that. But once again, even though it's lost some leaves and even though it's primarily been giving me runners, it still looks pretty good and definitely I think a little bit better than it did this time last year. But let me get my Philodendron Splendid rotated around over here so you can actually see the leaves, and we'll look at that next. Okay, so just a reminder, this is another plant that I did not have at this time last year, so I don't really have a comparison photo for you, but definitely has been growing well for me. Now we did lose a couple of our oldest leaves down here at the bottom during the fertilizer burn situation. Definitely affected this plant. but we are still pumping out a bunch of new growth. And as you can see, there is a new leaf getting ready to come in up there. And they are starting to come in a little bit tighter together than they originally were, which makes me happy. But I am going to try to do that notching that I keep mentioning in this video, that new technique on this plant to try to get some replacement on those leaves where we lost those leaves down there at the bottom. So hopefully that will help that to fill in down there. But absolutely love this plant. Now the only other plant, oh, I lied. There's a plant behind me that we have to look at. Let me get us flipped around. All right, you guys. So earlier this year, the subscriber who sent me the plants, the subscriber that lives in Hawaii that sent me those other cuttings we looked at, also sent me Mandula cuttings. And I also acquired some Epipremnum aureum Mandula cuttings as part of my inventory for sale. And recently I decided to go ahead and just keep the ones that I had put into inventory and combine them with the one the subscriber sent me into this pot so that I can have a fuller pot of Mandula. So absolutely loving how this is looking now that I've done this. Now I did acquire all of these over the course of this year, so no footage from last year to look at, but hopefully this will start to grow and fill in and start to look even more beautiful. My goal here is to have this kind of trail and look a lot like hopefully how my pearls and jade pothos in my bedroom looks. Now this tends to grow, in my experience, a whole lot slower than that plant, but it has started putting out a lot more new growth recently. So hopefully that keeps up. And the only reason it is currently living here on my kitchen floor is because after I potted all these up, I wanted to give them a little bit more light to really kick off their root growth and get established before I move it back to the north-facing window in my office, which is where it was living. But we got one more plant to look at on this side of the kitchen, and it is on the table. Okay, so this is my beautiful Calathea orbifolia. Now, we are probably not looking as great right now as we did last year, but we did recently repot this plant, and it is throwing a tiny bit of a fit. Also, I have not found a new cover pot to put it in. That's why it doesn't fit correctly anymore right now. But it was throwing a little bit of fit. It did lose some of its oldest leaves. But the good news is, since we repotted it, we are now pushing out some new growth. Now, once again, this leaf looks like crap right there because while it was coming in, Theo chewed on it. But one of these leaves, I think it's this one, this might be the newest one that had come in right before we repotted it. It looks great. This is what I'm talking about some of the older leaves are doing this and dying off. That's fine. I get a lot of this on this plant this time of year anyway, the crispiness like this, and I lose leaves, but as long as I'm still getting new growth, which as you can see, nice big new leaf coming in right here. As long as I'm getting new growth, I'm not that worried about losing some of those older leaves because this is the time of year when I typically get more new growth on this plant anyways, just because this is a southeast facing window. And so this time of year, this plant is getting more light typically than it does during the spring and summer when there's no like direct light coming through this window. Now this plant only gets direct light first thing in the morning, so it's not getting that harsh afternoon light, and it seems to be fine with that. But hopefully it looks like we're going to be okay with the repot. We're probably going to lose a few more of the oldest leaves, but since we are starting to push out new growth now, I know that it's definitely happier. Okay, the rest of the plants in here, I'm going to show you my semi-messy kitchen, are over there where all of those cuttings in the window are. So I'm going to have to see if I can do some rearranging so that we can see the permanent plants in my collection over there a little bit better first. And I don't know, I may have to like clear off the island and move them over here so that we can see them better. Okay, so I think I'm just going to kind of move things out as we go along, but first up here we have my beautiful Apobalus purple sword is what it's commonly referred to plant. I will flash the scientific name up on screen for you, but very reminiscent of my schismatic glottis plant, has that beautiful kind of grayish variegation on the leaves, but the difference between this and the schismatic glottis is that this one has that beautiful reddish coloring to the back side of the leaves, but grows fairly similarly. It kind of grows almost like, if you can see down here, almost kind of like a cross between the schismatic glottis and an aglaonema, and they are all related. All of those genuses of plants are related, so that's not that surprising. But this plant was newly acquired this year, so I don't have a comparison picture, but it has grown at a pretty decent rate, similar to my schismatic glottis, but perhaps a tiny bit slower. It just hasn't spread around in the pot as much, but definitely has put out plenty of beautiful new leaves. Absolutely love it. Can't wait to see what it does for me over the course of this year. Okay, let me start pulling out. I might pull out this whole tray of plants here so we can look at that next. Okay, so on this tray of plants, I want to actually start with my Peperomia albovitata piccolo banda is the variety, because this is the only plant on this tray that I had last year. So I have footage to show you. And as you can see, we have definitely grown quite a bit. Now this is a Peperomia that stays quite compact, even more so in my experience than the caparatas that we've looked at, but it has definitely gotten a little bit taller, a little bit fuller for me since this time last year, which is good because we had a little bit of a falling out this time last year, and this plant had been losing a lot of leaves and everything, and I was starting to get a little bit concerned. I did repot it back then, and it seems to have been a lot happier since then. I do see that we are starting to get a lot of new growth coming in right over here off of a completely new shoot. Now this has turned into 3 plants, so there's 3 different stems of plants growing in here at this point. I do not remember exactly how many it was when I first got it, but we do have a tendency to drop a lot of leaves on me at certain points of the year, and then we just start to fill back in. So it's fine with me. I like it staying nice and kind of tight and compact here because that way it doesn't interfere with the display of the other plants. Now back here we have the oh so beautiful Syngonium winlandii with its super velvety leaves. This is another plant that I got from Nicholson Hardy as a thank you from when I did that plant shop tour for them earlier this year. This plant has grown fairly well for me so far, but definitely a lot slower growing of a Syngonium compared to the other ones that I have. The other ones are Syngonium podophyllum. I'll have to double check if this is, I think this is still a podophyllum. I'll flash this full scientific name up on screen for you just to make sure, but it just tends to, or seems to have been growing a little bit slower for me, but it still looks absolutely beautiful. And once again, it works for the space I have it in right now. Now, this plant definitely will not be staying here for a very long time because it is going to start to want to climb. I am going to have to give it a support at some point. This is a philodendron white princess tricolor. So a lot of you have said to me that all white princesses have the capability of being tricolors. This one actually, when I bought it, the lady I bought it from said it has put out pink on its leaves before. It does have, hopefully you can see that line of pink running along the stem there. But part of the reason that I was so attracted to buy this one was because of this beautiful kind of mottled variegation on these leaves. I just think it's absolutely gorgeous. I said mottled, more marbled, versus what you see on a lot of them is just the big old chunks of like sectoral variegation, kind of like this. The marbled variegation, just a reminder, tends to be more stable, and I personally just think it looks more beautiful. So that's why I was attracted to this plant and bought it. But we will see. I think we've gotten 1, maybe 2 new leaves since I got this back in, I think it was maybe June or July. So we'll see what happens over the course of this year. All right, let me get this back up there and grab the next plant. Okay, so our next plant here is the beautiful philodendron red Anderson. Now this was on my wish list of plants. It is a plant that I got from Aroid Asia this year back in, I want to say maybe April or May, so I don't have a comparison picture from last year. It's also a little bit wet right now because when I pulled it down, it looked kind of dusty. So since I'm right next to the sink, I decided to go ahead and wash those leaves off real quick. But absolutely love this plant. Once again, we've got more of that kind of speckled marbly type of variegation on this one, which I absolutely love. But leaves come in a beautiful, if we will focus camera, thank you, beautiful shades of like white, green, and red, which can sometimes give a bit of a pinkish hue to the white sections of the leaves, or where they all combine, it gets kind of this grayish color, which I really, really like. And of course, we've got these beautiful red stems. Now this will grow in the same kind of pattern as that white princess that we were just looking at, so eventually we're going to need to give it a support, probably one pretty soon. This plant has actually put out a decent number of leaves for me since I got it. Definitely, I mean, we've lost a few over the course of that time too, but I know we've gotten at least like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I think the 5th one is probably starting to come out. So it's definitely growing pretty quickly. It is living, all of these plants that we're looking at right now are living in a west-facing window, but as you can see, my neighbor's house does obstruct some of the light here. So really they don't start getting direct light until later in the day. And obviously it is very overcast outside right now. So you wouldn't be able to tell today how much direct light they were getting Anyways, but they seem to be happier. This time of year, I do have to keep a closer eye on them though, just because the days are shorter, so the amount of hours that they're getting light sometimes might not be enough. If I see it's not, I'll just move them periodically throughout the week to live somewhere a little bit brighter, but they all seem to fare pretty well for me, but absolutely love this plant. Okay, I think we're gonna grab, if I can get him out of there, because he is behind a bunch of stuff, but I don't think we're going to be able to see well enough. Well, maybe we can see just from here. Hopefully this is okay for you guys. Let me move this big jar of stuff. And we'll see if that works. Okay, I don't think that's that bad. Okay, so this is my cyclamen. Absolutely love the flowers on this plant. This is one of the few plants that I have that flowers, and I admire it for its flowers because they're actually pretty little flowers that look kind of like floating little white butterflies. And this time of year, this plant grows more than in the summer. It is a plant that is not dormant. I'm telling you guys, I can talk today. It's just been a lot of filming and now I'm starting to get tongue-tied, I guess. It goes dormant in the summertime, not in the wintertime. So it tends to produce more growth and more flowers for me this time of year than any other time of year. But we did recently repot this. We took it up. Sorry, the faucet is just going to be in the way, you guys. We took it up from a 4-inch pot into a 6-inch pot, and it has really started to take off since then. So hopefully it will be noticeable in the footage from last year compared to now that we have gotten quite a bit wider. Just imagine that, or keep in mind that what you're seeing from last year was a 4-inch pot and this is a 6-inch pot. But I absolutely love it. It is just a nonstop grower for me. It doesn't know that it's summer in my house in the summer, so it keeps growing. It just really doesn't put out quite as many flowers in the summer for me, but definitely has done well for me this year. Okay, I'm gonna pull the retusa out from way back there. Okay, so this is my Haworthia retusa, and I have a feeling it's not gonna be super obvious on film, but this plant has like exploded over the course of the last year. And it may not look crazy like it. It hasn't exactly gotten like crazy tall or anything that's not expected for this type of plant, but it has just pupped like crazy. So just like the Haworthia that we looked at in my bedroom where I said it was pupping, this one has done the same thing, and it's just been basically expanding further out around the plant to the edges here. And we are definitely going to need to repot this one in the spring, and we'll probably separate some of these little plantlets out because I would like to kind of keep it at this size, but definitely a beautiful succulent plant. Hopefully you guys can see there's like clear little windows on this plant where you see what looks like stripes. It's like clear little windows and they're very translucent, and when the sun hits them, they look even more beautiful. And we are getting a little bit of sun stressing going on. I don't know if you can tell where that's like a little bit darker over there, but it's not hurting the plant. Plant has been doing great. Plant has been growing fine. And I'm telling you, this is another one of those plants that is just so easy to care for, especially if you are an underwaterer, because I think I go about, I don't know, 15 to 20 days probably in between waterings on this. I probably could go even longer if I wanted to. I basically just wait till it's all the way dried out, and then I just keep an eye on the leaves here and I just feel them. If they feel like they're not as firm, they're getting a little bit squishy like, that's usually a sign that they're using up their water stores, and then I go in and I water it. Super duper easy. Okay, let me pull our next plant down. Okay, so this is my Syndapsis pictus argyrius. So very similar looking to the Syndapsis pictus exotica, except that these leaves stay way smaller in size. So if you liked the look of that exotica, but were like, those leaves are giant, I'm not sure about that, this is a good alternative for you. Now this plant, we did repot this, I think back in, I want to say March or April, and we draped some of the vines across the top to help fill it in. So that's why it doesn't necessarily look like there's a lot of hanging new growth when we're comparing this to last year. But if I untucked all of those vines, we would have a lot more growth, but I wanted them to root in up here so we could fill it in a little bit more. But I think all in all, it probably looks a little bit fuller than it did last year. Once again, Syndapsis are not notoriously like the fastest growing plants. And this one did put out some runners for me recently, but all in all, this one has done a better job of actually producing leaves for me this year, which has been nice. Now, I also think this one, all the plants we repotted around this time, all have done this whole, let me just shove my roots to the bottom and swirl around. So I don't know. It's not like I did anything different than I normally do when I repot, you guys. I don't know what the deal is, but it seems to have been happier since we moved it in this pot. It's definitely looking gorgeous, and hopefully it will give me a lot more new leaf growth this year and not start just putting out runners. There is a brand new leaf coming in right there, I just noticed. So at least that's a good sign for the start of this year. Let me swap him out for, I think we only have like 1, 2, 3 more plants to look at in here. Okay, so these next 3 plants are not going to look good at all compared to the last time you saw them. And this is the only one, actually no, I take it back, none of these. I didn't have any of these when I filmed this video last year. This is my Monstera Thai constellation that I got from Aroid Asia. It was the first plant to fall victim to, or at least for me to notice, fall victim to the fertilizer burn situation. It just demolished this poor plant's roots. We lost 2 of our 3 leaves. But it has been rerooting, and I did show y'all a while back that it was getting new healthy roots, and they are getting even longer and more beautiful looking. I do want to get quite a few new roots on here though before I try to pot this up again. So it's going to stay in water for a little bit longer. Now, the next plant I want to look at, I also acquired at a plant swap this year. This is the Hoya Wilbur Graves China. So the previous Hoya that we looked at in the living room, come on camera, focus for me, was the Hoya Wilbur Graves Russia. This one, China one, is from China. The other one is from Russia, hence the names. This one's going to grow a little bit differently. And as far as I can tell, one of the biggest differences is that the leaves tend to be a little bit narrower, but you still get that beautiful silver variegation. Now, when I acquired this plant, it was potted up, but it had just been cut and put into soil. And the type of soil it was in was not soil that I was particularly familiar with or that I put my Hoyas in. And we had 2 leaves and we lost a leaf and I panicked. So I took it out of the soil and decided to let it finish starting rooting in water before I pot it back up again. And we are pushing out a lot of good new root growth right now. And as you can see, we are starting to push out new growth up at the top as well. So I'm gonna let these roots get probably about at least an inch longer, and then we're just gonna pot this back up into a little 2-inch pot. But I'm glad that it's doing okay, and probably one of my moments where a panic decision to put in water might have been the best option. All right, let me grab the last plant we have to look at in here. Okay, so this is my Philodendron Plougmanii, and some of you guys might have been wondering when we were in the living room, why didn't we see the plants on the mantle in the living room? Because we did plant style my mantle earlier this year. The reason we did not see the plants there, and first of all, I did change up some of the plants that were on there since we did that, but the reason I don't have any plants up there right now is, well, several reasons. One, this plant was up there and I did not realize until after probably I did that fertilizer burn video for you guys that this plant had been affected. We did lose our 2 leaves. We had 3 leaves, we lost our 2 leaves, but unfortunately the roots on this plant were affected as well. So that makes 3 plants where the roots got burned and started to rot in that situation. This one, the Monstera Thai constellation we just looked at, and my Epipremnum pinnatum albo. So I did take it out, I put it into water, and hopefully you guys can see through there. We do have new, nice, beautiful red roots starting to develop around in there. So we are staging our comeback. We have a valid, beautiful new growth point right there. So we will come back. I know this leaf still doesn't look fabulous because it had started to yellow, but it's okay. We can salvage this. It will be fine. At least the plant did not completely die on us. But this was the only plant that was still up on the mantle because Theo has decided to try to start breaking things that are on shelves in the house, whether unintentionally or intentionally. I can't say. It usually happens in the middle of the night. So I had to move all my breakable things up onto my mantle. So this was really the only plant I had room up there for now. So that's why we haven't looked at the mantle and won't be looking at the mantle, because right now there are no plants up there because this one is over here rehabbing. All right, well, that is everything in the kitchen. We have one more room to go, and that is the upstairs living room, and we currently only have 3 plants to look at up there. All right, you guys, so here are the 3 plants that are currently living in the upstairs living room here on this end table. And arguably the one that has gotten kind of the craziest right now is the Alocasia cuprea. So let's look at this one first. Now, I feel like the petioles on this plant have definitely got a lot longer this year. We are probably going to need to repot this one in the spring as well. We currently have 3, as you can see, big, beautiful, lovely leaves on this, but we do also have a corm, I think actually now 2 corn babies that have started to come in down here at the bottom. So this is about to be more than one plant in this pot, and we do have something starting to push out here, and I have a suspicion that it is a flower, which does not make me happy because then we will typically lose at least one of these larger leaves. But in my experience, this is just what happens with this plant. These petioles get rather long. I try to support them with things. I need to get some taller supports, but there's not much point in me doing that yet if we're going to repot this here in a few months, because then I'm just going to have to change them all out anyway. But all in all, though, this plant has done really well. It really likes living up here. This is a southern facing window, but it does have a solar screen on it, so there is not actually a lot of light that gets usable light that gets through that. We do have an east facing window over here. I do have a sheer thing on it right now just to help with filming, but loves the level of light in here. Now, my Tenanthe Burl Markstii, we also moved up here earlier this year, and that's when it really started to take off in growth. So this is going to look way different than last year. It should look way bigger, way more full, little bit taller. Absolutely has done wonderful for me this year. Did repot this one recently as well, and it seems to have been doing great. We have lost a few leaves. There is one leaf that's trying to die off down in there, but we do have a lot of new growth starting to come in, as you can see, like back here. And it is just doing absolutely fabulous and looking great. And I can't wait to see how much bigger it gets this year. Now, the last plant we have up here was originally a propagation of my Shumi Red Peperomia caparata Shumi Red. I moved this plant up here because I needed something small that would go well with these plants right here, and this is just the perfect plant for that. Now, I don't have footage, I don't believe, of this plant from last year because it was just a propagation, but it is not really grown that much anyway. Like I said, Peperomia is not always the fastest growers, but definitely has served a good purpose here because it definitely fits nicely with these plants. But those are all of our plants for up here in the living room. All right, everyone. Well, that is all of the plants currently in my permanent collection. My plan is to do the same thing this coming year. So basically I won't film another full houseplant tour until the end of the year, so we can do another little compare and contrast. But I really hope you guys have enjoyed coming along today and getting to see how much the plants have changed. If so, please be sure to click that like and or subscribe button down below, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Aloha!